Gary Barlow tax return and a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for the next few hours, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. On today's show, Prince Harry turns 40. So what kind of a decade has it been for him? In my niggle, I'll explore. Would you welcome him back? Then, as Sir Keir Starmer admits that his wife accepted free clothes from their biggest donor, are they just as bad as the Tories?
Their divisiveness, their cruelty, their robbing and their lies. Go there. Stop the Tories.vote right now. See you there.
Egg on your face, love. The boss of the Charles Gordon Trust joins me later. And in clickbait, was Mrs Thatcher right?
Socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them.
So Labour seem intent on taxing to the hilt. Was Mrs T on the money? But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. While the Home Office figures show 801 illegal migrants crossed the English Channel in 14 small boats yesterday. And that says 8 migrants died overnight whilst trying to cross the English Channel. The French Maritime Prefecture for the English Channel and North Sea said 53 migrants were on board a boat which got into difficulty off the coast of northern France. The news comes less than 2 weeks after a separate incident where 12 migrants died after a boat sank off the French coastline. A murder investigation has been launched in East London after a woman was stabbed to death. Officers were called in the early hours of this morning to an address in the Tower Hamlets, with a 32-year-old woman still being arrested on suspicion of murder. A 37-year-old man was also arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. The Foreign Secretary has defended the Prime Minister following allegations that Sir Keir Starmer's broken parliamentary rules by failing to declare donations of clothing for his wife. The Sunday Times reported the gifts came from Labour donor Lord Ali and covered the cost of a personal shopper, clothes and alterations for the Prime Minister's wife, Victoria, during the election campaign.
This is not a breach of transparency rules. It's a Prime Minister that's acting positively to make sure that everything is above board. And this money comes from a long-standing, over 2 decades. Lord Ali has been in the House of Lords. He has been a big supporter of the Labour Party. He's a self-made man. And I think there is nothing to see here, really.
Now, there's more trouble for Sir Keir Starmer's government as it's revealed pensioners could be left £1,000 worse off this winter. This comes on top of suggestions that Labour could also axe the single-person discount on council tax at next month's budget. The party have thus far refused to rule this out, stating that difficult decisions need to be made in order to fill the so-called £22 billion black hole left by the Conservative Party. Sir Ed Davies says the NHS cannot withstand Labour reforms without more funding. The Lib Dems leader made the comments during the second day of the Lib Dem party conference in Brighton. Earlier this week, Sir Keir Starmer said the NHS will not get any more funding without reforming, as he laid out a 10-year plan to fix the health service. Well, Sir Ed Davies says he's concerned the government is talking about reform before investment.
Been spent on the NHS, and in some areas there has.
But in many areas, there's not enough being spent. And at the election, we said in community health services, GPs, NHS dentists, community pharmacists, we said they've been underfunded. They don't have enough staff. That was our argument, and that's our argument now. And, you know, if you don't get more GPs, if you don't get more NHS dentists, if we don't open those community pharmacists, which are on the front line for many people's healthcare, people will end up going to hospital. That part of the problem has been so many people are going to hospital because we haven't got the primary care as strong as it needs to be.
And as you'll probably know by now, today is the Duke of Sussex's 40th birthday. The youngest son of the King will celebrate the start of his 40s at his Californian home with his wife Meghan and their children Archie and Lilibet. The Prince has said he was anxious to turn 30, but that he's excited about 40, and his mission is now doing good in the world. Earlier this morning, the X-account for the royal family wished Harry a happy birthday in their first public message for the Prince since 2021. And today is the 84th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, a military campaign that was seen as a turning point of World War II. The British Royal Air Force fought the German Luftwaffe in the skies over the UK, with the Brits claiming a victory that is now commemorated each year on the 15th of September. A commemoration service took place earlier today to mark the anniversary, with both Sir Keir Starmer and former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak both in attendance. And finally, the crew of the first ever private spacewalk have returned to Earth this morning. Let's take a look at the moment that the SpaceX Dragon touched down.
And there you can see. As you can see on your screen, and by the cheers behind us, the Polaris Dawn crew has successfully splashed down.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning. Thank you, Tatiana. It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome to GB News. Well, coming up, hip hip hooray for Prince Harry as he turns 40 today. Now, the King and Prince William wished the Duke of Sussex a happy birthday on social media, but is it enough to end the family feud? Concern goers are actually complaining after the EU flags were confiscated at the last night of the Proms. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, were the Proms right to confiscate EU flags? Then, as Sir Keir Starmer admits that his wife accepted free clothes from their biggest donor, are they just as bad as the Tories? Plus, Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will exact heavy prices after Yemen's Houthis claim responsibility for the ballistic missile strike. We'll get the latest from Uri Geller. Right, so today marks Prince Harry's 40th birthday. The Duke of Sussex was born in 1984 in London to King Charles and the late Princess Diana. In a 84-word statement ahead of his birthday, the Prince praised his two children, Archie and Lilibet, and spoke of the fresh perspective that he's gained on life after becoming a father. And the royal family's official X account posted wishing the Duke of Sussex a very happy 40th birthday today. The Prince will be celebrating his birthday at his Californian home with his wife, Meghan, and friends. And our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, brings us this report.
Prince Harry turns 40. The once lovable party prince, now far more polarising. The King's youngest son's made some dramatic changes to his life, moving to California with his wife Meghan, quitting his lifelong royal role. He wanted financial and personal freedom, but lost his honorary military titles and patronages in the process. A bitter blow for a man with deeply personal connections to the armed forces. The Duke of Sussex is still not speaking to his brother, the Prince of Wales, and remains estranged from his father, the King.
Reports suggest that whilst Charles would be open to a return of some sort on the part of his son and daughter-in-law, William absolutely wouldn't be open to that.
The Prince served for 10 years in the British Armed Forces, including 2 tours of Afghanistan. In 2014, he founded the Invictus Games with the help of the foundation he shared at the time with Prince William and Catherine.
Sport has the ability to heal, to change lives and to save lives.
The Paralympic-style competition helps wounded, injured and sick veterans through sport and celebrated 10 years in May. The Prince also founded the charity Centre Barley in 2006, which supports young people in southern Africa.
At the heart of Centre Barley, what we've always believed is that every single young person should have a chance at a better future.
Wellchild has him as patron, helping seriously ill young people in the UK.
It allows us to shine a spotlight on the resilience and positivity that they demonstrate every single day.
The expensive fairy tale marriage to Meghan Markle in 2018 has produced 2 children, Prince Archie, who's 5, and Princess Lilibet, who's 3. This week, Prince Harry told the BBC that becoming a father of 2 incredibly kind and funny kids has given me a fresh perspective on life, as well as sharpening my focus in all my work. But tensions remain, particularly with the British press, and his popularity has plummeted, having previously been one of the most popular members of the royal family. He's launched a number of legal battles against British newspaper publishers in recent years, going against the royals' never complain, never explain motto. Meanwhile, his legal battle with the Home Office over his UK security is said to have frustrated the King. Harry's expected to celebrate his 40th birthday with family and friends today, a time to reflect on the past and look to the future. Cameron Walker, GB News.
So is it time to forgive and forget? Well, joining me now is former BBC royal correspondent Michael Cole. Michael, lovely to see you.
Good afternoon, Nana. The big surprise of today is that the Prince and Princess of Wales added their birthday good wishes to those of Buckingham Palace. Now, there's been none of that for at least 2 years. So what should we read into that? Well, I would say it is definitely not an olive branch. There is no contemplation of any rapprochement between the brothers. The brothers are still at war. I think it's a case really of noblesse oblige, doing the right thing in just acknowledging his important 40th birthday. But I think the froidure, the coldness that exists, which didn't when we see that lovely picture of them all together, will continue at the moment. It is said, Nana, that the King this afternoon will, at some stage, talk via video link, rather like we are at the moment, to his son in California, 8 hours behind us. So it's just after 7 o'clock in the morning there. Whether that happens or not remains to be seen. But however much the King may wish for a reconciliation, I think there would be no chance of that with his brother as things are at the moment.
Because I can imagine that William won't want any sort of reconciliation. I mean, look, if Prince Harry wants to get involved and be part of it, and the King has extended the olive branch, and Harry would like William to potentially, reunite and to be friends, you'd think he would perhaps amend the paperback of his spare memoir that's coming out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, he didn't add anything to it, and he didn't an afterword or a new chapter. Maybe that was also a gesture that he didn't want to cause more hurt, because you can't exaggerate the amount of hurt that was caused, not just because of his revelations and criticisms of his brother, but of course of the Princess of Wales. And I think that's the thing that most bitterly upset his brother William. And I think it's going to be a very long time before there's a possibility of a reconciliation between them and a renewal of the friendship, the brotherhood that was once so real and so important in their lives. A very, very great pity. Of course, 40th birthday, an important time. 40 used to be said as the the beginning of your life again. And by this time, a man should know where he's going and know what he's doing. One has to wonder whether Prince Harry really does know. There are other reports that, he's missing this country. I don't think he wants to come back here, of course, permanently. His family, as he said, are most important to him. That's quite understandable, and one can commend that. But it's interesting in that 84-word message which she gave on just before his 40th birthday, there's no mention of Meghan at all. And people who are looking into these things and read the runes are wondering if that was in any way significant.
Does he not get some money as well? Because he's turned 40.
Yes, that's right. Quite a nice birthday present. Allegedly £7 or £8 million, allegedly left to him by the late Queen Mother, who also looked after all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But of course, I say allegedly because royal wills are sealed. We'll never know who left what to whom. So it's a matter of speculation. But I don't think he's short of a bob or two. The only thing is that his lifestyle in California is extremely expensive, round-the-clock security and so on, and also keeping up with their celebrated friends who live around them. So I'm sure it'll come in very handy, but whether it's the solution to all the problems. Meanwhile, the Archwell Foundation, which is the one they used for all their good works, which they're very happy about, has rather grandly rebranded itself as the Office of Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Well, now we know.
Yeah, we know indeed. And speaking of Meghan, she apparently specifically said that she feels remorse over the royal racist controversy. That was reported in Grazia magazine, which came through supposed friends of Meghan Markle. Is there... Do we think that that might be part of it? They're moving towards the royal family to perhaps try and, you know, make amends in some way?
Well, of course, there's always hope. One hates to see family disputes, whether they're in the royal family or in your family or anywhere around the corner's family. But I think the chances of that are almost negligible. They really are, because so much hurt has been caused, and they've made their views clear. I mean, it was quite clear when they left the royal family in 2020, scooting first to Canada and then on to California, which may have been her original destination anyway. She quit the royal family. She didn't want it, quite clearly she didn't want it. And he is there. I'm sure there are things about this country and his friends over here. He must miss them. Of course he must.
Of course he must, yeah.
I think, I think
you'd think so, Michael, but the way he's behaving, actions speak louder than words. Michael Cole, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Good afternoon, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. We've got a packed show for you. Coming up, Yemen's Houthis claim responsibility for the ballistic missile attack on Israel. Uri Geller will be giving us the latest. And then next, as Prince Harry turns 40, is it time for him and Meghan to return to the UK and start over? This is GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
But let's get stuck in. Prince Harry, he's consulted former aides about a possible partial return to the UK as he seeks to repair his public image, that is according to the Daily Mail.
Who wants him? I'm sorry. This is, of course, he's got his book Spare. The paperback comes out later this year. Now, he's not updating it, but he'll want to promote it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He says he's not doing any interviews, but we're talking about him now, we're talking about Spare.
Yeah.
And is he going to come back with his wife? What about the children? Because apparently it's not safe for his wife and children in this country, according to Harry, even though he took his wife to Colombia, which is much less safe than Britain, in my view.
It's absurd. Anyway, he was able to attend his uncle's funeral quite easily.
He did.
Nobody knew he was coming. He said he wasn't, and then he did. And he was perfectly safe.
And he would have had the same security as every other member of the royal family who attended that event.
Yeah.
But, of course, he didn't speak to his brother at the funeral.
No, he wouldn't, would he?
So if he's trying to fix it, honestly, a funeral is where you should put all differences aside because it's not about you. It's about respect to the person, the family of the person who's gone, which was his uncle. It was his... Diana's sister's husband had died. So, and yet they didn't speak. They didn't speak in the church, they didn't speak when they left the church. Incredible, isn't it?
It's awful, because that moment is when you realise that we are all mortal, and at that point you should... all other things should transcend that, but not...
Well, this move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In From the Cold, because apparently he's a bit fed up with his life in Montecito. Does that mean with his wife?
I don't know.
Oh, no. Apparently he's dissatisfied with advice from his American-based image expert.
Well, they've had about 10 of them, haven't they? They're on to their number 11.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, 20 minutes after 3 o'clock. Welcome if you just tuned in. Good. It's the early part of the show. We've got loads more to bring you. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. You can also stream the show live on YouTube. But now it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, as Prince Harry turns 40, should the Duke and Duchess of Sussex perhaps return to the UK and start afresh? I mean, would you forgive them? A new survey by Ipsos reveals that over a third of Brits would support Prince Harry coming home and resuming royal duties. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, as Prince Harry turns 40, should the Duke and Duchess of Sussex return to the UK and start afresh? Right, well, joining me now is GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly. I'm going to start with Nigel.
After all that.
Yes, exactly. Nigel Nelson, what do you think of this?
Yes, I'd like to see them return. I was very sorry that they decided to give up royal duties. I think their place is in the royal family, and certainly I would like to see them back. Now, there's a lot of bridge building to do to make that happen, so I don't expect it to happen quickly. As Michael was saying earlier, that a couple of events today, the idea that the royal family send the first message to Harry for 2 years to wish him a happy 40th birthday, the fact that the Prince and Princess of Wales have done the same thing. That feels like a little bit of a thaw, not an olive branch, as Michael was saying, but a bit of a thaw. And the fact that Harry is not updating his book, very unusual to not update a paperback from a really successful hardback. So we're missing things in there like the coronation, how he felt about the cancer diagnosis for Kate and for his father. But the fact he's left well alone, that again feels like a bit of a can we try and make up.
Well, he hasn't taken out that Camilla is dangerous, or the bit about William's bald patch, even though his is just as big.
No, he hasn't amended it, but he hasn't added to it.
Listen, he could take those things out. He could take some.
That would probably be going a bit too far on the basis they're already out there. What he hasn't done is added anything to it.
But it would demonstrate a level of contrition, wouldn't it? Danny Kelly.
Did you mention a bald patch?
Yeah.
Us bald men are very sensitive about our patches.
I'm bald under this, Danny.
Very sensitive.
Covered mine up.
I would like to see them come back, but for not the same reasons as Nigel, because I just think it would be blockbuster entertainment. I really would. What was interesting about that Ipsos survey, a third want them back. The biggest story is 2/3 of the UK don't want them back. That's the story. A third may want, 2/3 don't. I'd like to see them come back because it'll be fireworks. Nobody, generally speaking, nobody likes a rat. Nobody likes someone snitching on their family. Don't forget, he actually threw them under the bus. You know when he wore a Nazi uniform?
Terrible.
He blamed his brother and Kate for that. I mean, that is going low. Because that's what people really... If people want to give Harry a kick and they'll say, you dressed like a member of the SS or whatever. And now he's saying, whoa, it's not my fault. My brother told me to do it.
Yeah, but his brother didn't dress him in it. You know,
exactly.
This is what you get from these two, though, sadly. I don't want to be horrible, because it's his birthday. So I think I should be really nice. But you can't blame somebody else for making you dress up in an outfit when you're a grown man. He's a grown man.
Unless he was high as a kite on cocaine at the time, couldn't make his own decisions.
There's no evidence of that.
No, he does. He admits it in the book when he was 17.
When he was dressed wearing
Well, when he was 17, he was snorting coke. It's in the book.
Well, OK, it's in the book, but look, I mean, there's no evidence at that particular decision. He'll use that now to say that's the reason why I did it. No, you probably won't. And Nigel Nelson.
Well, I mean, yes, he made mistakes. That he's
We all did.
Yes, exactly. And we're going back now some years when he was a younger man, and I think he has had difficulties growing up, obviously, with the death of his mother when he was 12. The other thing, I think, that he seemed to be happiest when he was in the army.
Yeah.
And he was really upset, and I think I sort of felt for him when the media then decided to out the fact he was in Afghanistan. It wasn't the British media. We all knew he was there, but we'd agreed with the MOD that we would never report it until he returned home. It was a foreign media that found him there. That blew his cover and made him a kidnap risk, so he had to come home, and he was hugely disappointed about that. So there were a load of things leading up to his 30s where I think he'd had a pretty rough time, and he says in his 30s he was anxious, now he's looking forward to his 40s.
But, you know, a lot of people lose their parents when they're in their, young. Some lose them even younger than that. He lost his mother. But, he has got money. I know that can't bring people back. You've got money, you've got pampering, you've got everything around. Anything, any resource you need, you could have.
I don't buy that money can bring you happiness.
No, I don't buy that either.
I don't buy that,
No, I don't buy that at all.
You can have all the dough in the world in Montecito living in a 10-bedroom pad with a swimming pool outside. Doesn't mean that you're happy. Doesn't mean that you can't step out your front door and maybe go for a jog or something, or go to the newsagents to buy some papers.
But the point I was making is that he's got all that, and yet he's so flaming ungrateful.
I would separate the money from how he feels emotionally.
No, because I'm saying that you have all of that, and you can really, use all of that to help you get through it. And at the end of the day, whilst money isn't everything, I have more sympathy for somebody who's absolutely, penniless, with absolutely nothing going through the similar thing, than him. If you put the two people next to each other, of somebody who's got absolutely nothing, somebody who's gone through exactly the same thing, and then there's him, at least he has resource to get help.
And he is financially motivated. Look at the Netflix deals.
Exactly.
Look at the book deals.
Exactly.
In fact, you can't have it both ways, I suppose.
Neither can you. Which side are you on?
No, because what?
I'm a bit confused there.
Well, no, let me clarify. I don't want you to be confused, because you can be financially driven, but then when you get all the dough, you realise that it doesn't help.
But isn't this family unique? So what he might be upset about, which I think would be understandable, is you've got the Queen, that one of the reasons he says he stayed in Britain for as long as he did is because he wanted to support his grandmother. This is a unique kind of position to be in.
Yeah.
And the fallout with the family, one the king, the other the heir to the throne, that's big stuff. I can understand that really actually plays on your conscience.
Yeah, and that's true, but let's be honest, he got in that position all by himself on his own. He didn't need anybody's help. He went on to Oprah, which was madness when he said that he wanted privacy. They both went on there. Then they accused somebody in the royal family of being racist, which he later retracted 2 years later after the Queen had died. So she went to her grave not knowing that actually what he meant by it was unconscious bias, which means he gaslit the world. And he blamed the British press for the misinterpretation. It was
what he should do, if they wanted to ingratiate themselves further with the 2/3 of the British public who don't want to see him back, they should maybe be more contrite to say, do you know what, on reflection, we could have worded things differently.
Well, maybe she did say something a bit like that in Gratia. She said she regrets the way...
She should say she's sorry rather than regrets, because Oprah Winfrey at the time said, what? They said, what? And at that point, she should have said, no, Oprah, no, you got the wrong end of the stick. Nothing racist, you got the wrong end of the stick, but she didn't. And she let it develop into a worldwide story. And now, 2 years later, she's saying she regrets it. Say sorry.
She said if that is your assumption, that's a fair assumption to make. Words
That's it.
to those effects.
Yeah, words to that effect,
Which is not really...
And now she's backtracked.
Well, then they're trying to say, it's not racism, we weren't talking about racism. If you weren't talking about racism, you should have corrected...
Nipped it in the bud.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
instead of allowing it to sort of manifest.
I'm not saying they haven't made huge mistakes along the way.
Massive mistakes.
They should say sorry then, Nige.
And I think saying sorry, absolutely, is if you really wanted to come back. And as I said, it doesn't seem to be that much evidence he really does, is the point.
I don't think he does.
And he's still got this fuss about security that he's suing the Home Office over, which he shouldn't have left the rolls in the first place if he wanted armed policemen around him all the time. But apart from that, if gradually he was able to get back, now he's in his 40s, into the royal family, I join all those other people who are saying, yeah, we'd quite like to see him back.
I slightly object to paying for it.
That third of the British public. You're in the minority. You're in the minority.
Not for the first time.
I would object to paying anything towards his upkeep. I find... I'm sorry, but I just find the way they've behaved, how rude they've been to their family. I mean, look, Meghan's dad hasn't even seen the kids.
Yeah, and also the staff, they're leaving in their droves. You know, apparently she's just gone through her 10th PA or something. Yeah. Well, that tells you all you need to know about a person. It tells you all you need to know about what it's like to work for her.
Well, no, I mean, look, in their defence, not necessarily. Maybe the people that they kept employing, maybe they've got bad judgment and keep employing...
What, 10 times? You want to sack the HR guy doing the interviewing then?
Well, perhaps that's maybe he's one of the ones that's already gone.
He's number 11.
It's certainly a job I wouldn't take.
Well, listen, keep your thoughts coming. We'd love to hear your messages to Prince Harry. We'll always do that and read them out. gbnews.com/your say. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, Yemen's Houthis claim responsibility for the ballistic missile attack on Israel. We'll get the latest from Uri Geller. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nana, thank you. The top stories. Home Office figures show 801 illegal migrants crossed the English Channel in 14 small boats yesterday. That is as 8 migrants died overnight whilst trying to cross the Channel. The French Maritime Prefecture for the English Channel and North Sea said 53 migrants were on board a boat which got into difficulty off the coast of northern France. The news comes less than 2 weeks after a separate incident where 12 migrants died after a boat sank off the French coastline. A murder investigation has been launched in East London after a woman was stabbed to death. Officers were called in the early hours of this morning to an address in Tower Hamlets with a 32-year-old woman since being arrested on suspicion of murder. A 37-year-old man was also arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has defended the Prime Minister following allegations that Sir Keir Starmer's broken parliamentary rules by failing to declare donations of clothing for his wife. The Sunday Times reported the gifts came from Labour donor Lord Ali and covered the cost of a personal shopper, clothes and alterations for the Prime Minister's wife during the election campaign.
This is not a breach of transparency rule. It's a Prime Minister that's acting positively to make sure that everything is above board. And this money comes from a long-standing, over 2 decades. Lord Ali has been in the House of Lords. He has been a big supporter of the Labour Party. He's a self-made man. And I think there is nothing to see here, really.
And today is the Duke of Sussex's 40th birthday. The youngest son of the King will celebrate the start of his 40s at his Californian home with his wife Meghan and their children Archie and Lilibet. The Prince has said he was anxious to turn 30, but that he's excited about turning 40 and his mission is now doing good in the world. Earlier this morning, the X account for the royal family wished Harry a happy birthday in their first public message for the Prince since 2021. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, as we head into next week, we have high pressure building, so that means plenty of fine and dry weather around and some fairly warm days on offer too. For the end of the weekend, though, we do have this cold front which is slowly edging its way towards the southeast of the country, and that's bringing in some cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Now, as we head into the evening, there will still be some rain and drizzle towards the south, but it is generally easing and should just be largely cloudy, and that means it's going to be a fairly mild night compared to recent nights. To the north of this, though, plenty of clear skies and light winds, so we're likely to see some mist and fog develop overnight, particularly in northwestern parts. And it's going to be fairly chilly too, so in rural areas likely to see some spots of grass frost. So as I say, to start Monday morning, there should be plenty of fine, bright weather around, but there's likely to be some mist and fog in places as well, particularly in those rural spots. So even though there'll be bright sunshine, do take care for the Monday morning commute, particularly in northern parts of Wales, northwest England, where there could be some quite dense fog in places. Towards the south, a fairly cloudy start. Still could be the drips and drabs of rain and drizzle across hilly areas, but any mist and fog and cloud is generally going to be lifting and breaking through the course of the day as that high pressure builds, and that means plenty of fine and dry conditions to start the new working week. Perhaps a bit more high cloud in the northwest towards the end of the day, perhaps even seeing some rain and drizzle creeping into the Outer Hebrides, but otherwise plenty of fine dry weather and feeling fairly warm as well, with highs of 22 Celsius down in the southeast. Into the evening, feeling quite chilly as soon as the sun goes down, likely to see some frost once again and some mist and fog, but still more in the way of cloud feeding into the northwest. And as we head into the next week, high pressure sticking around, so once again lots of fine, warm, sunny weather around.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hooray!
35 minutes after 3 o'clock. Good afternoon. Welcome. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, will the Royal Albert Hall right to confiscate EU flags at the Proms, at the last night of the Proms? Now, last month, the Royal Albert Hall released guidance banning flags related to prescribed groups to protest and hatred. But last night, there was confusion as to some attendees as they had their EU flags taken away from them. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will the Royal Albert Hall right to confiscate EU flags at the Proms? Joining me now, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly.
I think they were right. I don't like to see the Union flags at last night at the Proms.
What, the Union flag?
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I've got this proscribed terror organisation on my mind, and it's not the European Union.
No, it's not.
They're definitely not prescribed terrorists.
Anyway.
I think they are. I don't like to see it. I think it's trying to sort of sow division, and it's almost an arrogant, conceited way of hijacking this particular spectacular occasion, just to, if you like, rub people's noses in it that they were wrong. That's their perception. That's their argument. Perfectly reasonable position to take. And I think that last night at the Proms is all about what's great about the United Kingdom. OK, we're not part of the European Union anymore. And you get the impression that they're all these middle-class lefty lovies who are just trying to take control of the situation. This is an iconic evening in the history of British TV, because that's the only time I watch it on the television. And I think that they were right to confiscate them.
But what about this freedom of expression, freedom of speech?
Well, express yourself outside. That's not what last night's the Proms is about.
Nigel Nelson.
Well, first of all, they should get their rules sorted out, because some EU flags were confiscated and some weren't. So the staff there didn't know what they were meant to be doing. Now, the rules at the moment say that anyone can bring in a national flag. What you can't bring in is a protest flag. So you could argue the EU flag is a protest against Brexit. You wouldn't be able to bring in a Palestinian flag, apparently, but they don't say anything about an Israeli one. If there are Israelis in the audience, they may want to wave their flag. Would it be against their rules to bring in a United Nations flag? So my point really is, if you're going to have flags at an event, what you can't do is stop people bringing in the flag of their choice, provided it's not a prescribed organisation like ISIS or Hamas or something like that. Beyond that, you must let everything in.
Is this what we've become?
Would you not want the Union? Would you want the Union Jack being confiscated?
No,
as people walk in?
my point basically is that these flags alongside the Union Jack, like you, I watched the last night of the Proms because I love all that. I love the idea that people are waving Union Jacks and singing Rule Britannia. I think it's a great evening, a great British event. What I'm saying is, if their rules are such that they can't understand what they're doing, then ban all flags. And that would have to include the Union Jack. Better still, what they should do is...
Why would it include the Union Jack? You could ban all flags apart from the Union Jack. It's your venue, your rules. You can have whatever you want in there. Why not?
Well, in which case, if it's their venue, their rules, let's have the EU flag too. I mean,
well, their rules would say, no, you're not bringing that in because this is about the United Kingdom. So if you want to bring in a flag, either bring in a United Kingdom one or maybe parts of the Union, but don't bring in something else.
So hang on, you could bring in a Scottish flag and a Welsh flag.
I don't know, you'd have to decide. I don't know whether I would or I wouldn't. I don't know what the deal would be. But if you have the United Kingdom flag, that's all of them.
Yeah, I mean...
I don't think I would... I don't know whether with the other two, but you'd have to be clear. But I would say no other flags. They'd have to be British flags.
Right, so if someone wanted to bring in Stars and Stripes, that would be banned?
No, it's not... What's wrong with you, Nigel? Stars and Stripes, where's that for?
Yeah, well, for America.
Exactly. What did I say?
Right. I heard exactly what you said. I hope you start running the Albert Hall now.
But Nigel, before Brexit, I would hazard a guess, I don't know, but I would be surprised if ever there was an EU flag before Brexit. Now, that tells you all you need to know about what is motivating the people who carry the flags.
And that's what I'm saying, that there's no question it's a protest.
So I don't think it's the occasion for protest.
Yeah, but
I think it's the occasion for unity.
But where do you stand, if they allow national flags in, where would you stand about an Israeli flag or a Palestinian flag?
I wouldn't allow it in, because we're not in Israel and we're not on the Gaza Strip.
So we're back to where you are, in fact, only Union Jacks.
But I think most Israelis would understand that and would probably bring in a Union Jack flag, because they're probably... very supportive of the United Kingdom anyway.
They're politically motivated flags at the moment. Forgive me. Forgive me. They're politically... Can I... OK. I'm sorry.
Well, I've come to the end now.
All right.
Talk over me. I'll let you finish what you have to say, so when I'm talking, let me finish, and then you can come in when I'm done.
Have you finished?
No, I'll let you know. There'll be a silence.
They're politically motivated, and that's the problem. Israel, Palestine, EU.
Russia?
I've finished talking now, so it's over to Nana.
Don't let me start It's My Show business again, because I'm getting tired. Yeah, look, I mean, seriously, is this what we've become, though? Oh, you can't bring that flag... I sort of think, I don't want people to bring in protest flags. These flags have become to mean things that are protest, like the pro-Palestine protest flag, and people bringing in this to... It's all passive-aggressive kind of...
It's bad manners, basically.
It's bad manners, frankly, yeah.
Yeah, it is bad manners. No, I think people should bring in a Union Jack. I'm just saying that the rules themselves need to be clarified to make sure that the Albert Hall know what they're doing, which clearly what happened here, they didn't.
Yeah, there's bad management. You had a few people letting them in, you had most of them not letting them in.
Yeah.
So you can't just use a couple of examples to say they got it terribly wrong and you need to decide what your policy is from now on.
Well, we seem to get... Nana's rule will be Union Jacks only. Mine would be national flag. I'd forget the protest side of it, so...
I'd like the Scottish one in and the Welsh one.
Well,
and a Northern Irish one.
Well,
and an English one.
But you asked me that, and that was a good point. Would you, under this rule, would people be able to bring a Scottish one, an English one, and a Welsh one?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter.
Part of Great Britain. Part of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I think I'd be on for that.
You're OK with Great Britain?
I'm OK with that, because that's all part of the Union. I like the Union Jack, because it's united of all of them. But the other ones are fine as well.
Right. But if a little Scots brought them in to support Scottish independence, that would be a protest flag.
Well, at that point, yes.
But how do you know what's
under the rules to be back?
Yeah, but you don't know what's motivating them when they carry a Scottish flag.
You don't know what's motivating them when they're carrying an EU one. But we
do.
We all suspect.
We do.
No, we suspect that it's actually a protest against Brexit.
There you go, then.
Yeah, that's what we suspect, but we don't absolutely know that's the reason.
But people can lie even if you thought you did know. They'd make something else up. So we're not going to get anywhere with this. Look, I actually think that now I've thought it through, I probably wouldn't allow the different elements, the separate parts of the Union, and I'd just say Union Jack flags, only because then otherwise you could end up in the same position again.
OK.
OK. Has everybody agreed with that at home? What do you think? GBNews.com/your say. Next, Yemen's Houthis claim responsibility for the ballistic missile strike on Israel. Uri Geller joins me in a moment.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Sunday with Michael Portillo. From 11, only on GB News.
My next guest is a composer and film director whose musical journey began at the tender age of 4.5 when he started playing the piano. Under the tutelage of luminaries such as Sir George Benjamin and Sir Harrison Birtwistle, he has honed his craft, primarily grounding himself in the classical world. He has written music in sets of composition in the 24 major and minor keys of the chromatic scale, producing an album which is accompanied by 24 videos, and it's called 24. I'm joined now by Fabio D'Andrea. Fabio, great to see you. Tell me a little bit, I'm a layman when it comes to music, tell me a little bit about how a composer chooses a key and what it means to the composer to have chosen the key.
Sure. Well, I think every musical key, and there's 24 of them, major and minor, they have their own feel. So you could play a piece in, say, C major, which is normally regarded as the simple key, it's all the white notes on the piano. But if you play that piece, say, in A-flat major, it's going to have a very different feel. So I decided to create this project, 24 pieces, again, looking back at our traditions and the history of what composers have done in the past, especially in regards to piano music, and explore every key, see if I could bring out the emotion that you feel from that actual key itself.
Were you fonder of some than others? I imagine, for example, you're not so fond of C because it's too straightforward.
Actually, no, I love all of them. And that's the beauty of music. Every key has its own feel. And some keys are associated with different feelings. So, for example, C major has actually been historically associated with victory. It's quite a victorious feel about it. I love D-flat major. That's quite mellow. But every key has its own special feeling. And sometimes something will just sound different in that one key, and it's meant to be in that key. So for me, this has been a whole exploration of that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We are GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. If you just tuned in, where have you been? You've missed 46 minutes, but it's fine. There's loads more. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch at gbnews.com/your say. We were talking about the flag. Valerie says it's our country, our flag. We should be able to fly it without comments. Come on, King Charles, defend your country. You need to speak out or you'll be banned from flying the flag over Buckingham Palace. You tell him, girl. Paul says the night of the Proms is about the UK and is a British event and tradition, nothing to do with anywhere else. Therefore, no other flags would be allowed. Yeah, with you on that one. This one, last night of the Proms, is a celebration of Britishness. Is Nigel British-phobic? Nigel Nelson joining me.
No, I'm not.
You better not be. And then Hugh says, did the Albert Hall confiscate EU flags? Yes, I think that was the issue, wasn't it? Yeah,
that was the story.
That was the story, my friend. Yeah, they did. Which, yeah, I think is fair enough. Richard says this, David Lammy has defended the Prime Minister. Now defend yourself, Mr Lammy. Interesting. I'm not quite sure what that relates to, but I'll have... He was on earlier, David Lammy was talking earlier. He was defending the Prime Minister over the suits, wasn't he? The money for the outfits for the wife. Yeah.
Lord Ali.
Yeah. And let's see, lots of you getting in touch. Keep them coming, gbnews.com/your say. Right, but as BBC bosses hit back after the damning report published last week, which showed 1,500 occasions where the broadcaster had shown bias towards Israel in its coverage of the war with Hamas. And just yesterday, Yemen's Houthis hit Israel with ballistic missiles, sparking a fire. Well, let's discuss some of these developments with performer and mystifier Uri Geller. Uri, I want to talk about this because what are your thoughts? Because the BBC broadcaster, what's his name, Jeremy Bowen, dismissed the report that there were 1,500 incidents which showed bias towards Israel. What are your thoughts, or against Israel?
Okay, let me react to this news. The BBC Middle East editor Jeremy Bowen has flippantly dismissed an investigation into BBC's bias against Israel. But Nana, he himself is in the report. And in my opinion, he has not even read it. This is breathtaking arrogance. I'll repeat it, breathtaking arrogance. This shows that Bowen is not to be trusted. He is not impartial, and he is incapable of taking criticism. Look, the BBC needs to get rid of Jeremy Bowen. This is my opinion. Now, something else, Nana. I'm actually in the UK at the moment. I'm here with my daughter and my granddaughters. And even though I'm not in Israel, I was still woken up this morning by missile sirens on my phone. On my phone. Listen to this. This is what everyone in Israel has to go through every day. This is an alert. This is an alert which everyone in Israel gets. I mean, the minute the phone sounds this alert, this warns people to take immediately cover. People run out of their apartment into shelters because we are under attack, missile attack, Nana. Can you imagine living like this in the UK? It's unbelievable, unacceptable, of course. But what happened was a missile was fired from Yemen. But thanks God, it landed in an open area and there are no casualties. This is, Nana, our daily reality in Israel. Now, let me show you something else. Look, this is totally shocking. Look, Nana, you have children. This week, it was revealed that the entrance to a tunnel where 6 of our hostages were brutally murdered in Gaza was hidden inside a child's bedroom. Look at this. Inside a child's bedroom, an innocent Palestinian child was used as cover by Hamas in order to hide a war crime. These tunnels, by the way, are all over Gaza. There are still over 100 hostages in them, including a baby, Nana. And it also is believed that the Hamas leader, whose name is Yahya Sinwar, is hiding there too. But look, Nana, I'm going to tell you something sensational here on GB News. So listen very carefully. It is well known that I have paranormal powers. I'm what they call a remote viewer. This means I'm able to see things which are out of sight to ordinary people, of course. In fact, the CIA used me in a top secret project called Project Stargate in the 70s. You can Google it, just put in Project Stargate. Now, I cannot say too much because it is all very, very confidential. But all I will say is, some people believe that I know, with my psychic powers, exactly where Sinwar is. Look, I will not confirm that myself. I cannot go into it, but Sinwar should know that I can see very, very far and very, very deep. The problem is, Nana, is that Sinwar is surrounding himself with hostages, which he's using as human shields, and he will kill them if he is cornered. And that's what I have to say. In my opinion, and mark my words, the IDF will capture him, dead or alive, very soon.
Uri Geller, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much. There's Uri Geller, he's live there. Now, of course, I can't verify the story that he said with regard to the hostages being found in a child's bedroom or behind, hidden there, but those are Uri's thoughts, and that's what he said. And with regard to the BBC spokesperson said that we have serious questions about the methodology of this report, particularly its heavy reliance on AI to analyse impartiality. However, we will consider the report carefully and respond directly to the authors once we have had time to study it in detail. Right, so that's what everyone's been saying. That's the message from the BBC. gbnews.com/your say. Let's have a quick look at what people have been saying. Benny's been in touch. This one, he says, BBC are infested with left-wing liberals pushing their views instead of reporting without bias. It's been going on for decades, and until we make the BBC fund themselves, it will continue. Caitlin says this with regard to the Daily Express. She says, you have no plan, Starmer. Tories blast PM as a man with no ideas to stop migration. All plans are safely hidden away in a brain full of fog. Love it. I'm sorry, I couldn't help. That's good. Keep them coming. Keep those coming. gbnews.com/your say. And then Valerie, who said there should be no debate over flying our Union Jack. It's our country. It's our flag. Absolutely. We'll keep them coming. gbnews.com/your say. Next, my monologue on Prince Harry. It's his 40th birthday. Should he be so excited about the next milestone while living in the US, or should he and Meghan build bridges and return to the UK? Let us know what you think as ever go to the usual places. You can also download the GB News app where you can watch the programmes and everything on this channel completely free. But now, let's get an update with your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, as we head into next week, we have high pressure buildings. That means plenty of fine and dry weather around and some fairly warm days on offer too. For the end of the weekend, though, we do have this cold front which is slowly edging its way towards the southeast of the country, and that's bringing in some cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Now, as we head into the evening, there will still be some rain and drizzle towards the south, but it is generally easing and should just be largely cloudy, and that means it's going to be a fairly mild night compared to recent nights. To the north of this, though, plenty of clear skies and light winds, so we're likely to see some mist and fog develop overnight, particularly in northwestern parts. And it's going to be fairly chilly too, so in rural areas likely to see some spots of grass frost. So as I say, to start Monday morning, there should be plenty of fine, bright weather around, but there's likely to be some mist and fog in places as well, particularly in those rural spots. So even though there'll be bright sunshine, do take care for the Monday morning commute, particularly in northern parts of Wales, northwest England, where there could be some quite dense fog in places. Towards the south, a fairly cloudy start. Still could be the drips and drabs of rain and drizzle across hilly areas, but any mist and fog and cloud is generally going to be lifting and breaking through the course of the day as that high pressure builds, and that means plenty of fine and dry conditions to start the new working week. Perhaps a bit more high cloud in the northwest towards the end of the day, perhaps even seeing some rain and drizzle creeping into the Outer Hebrides, but otherwise plenty of fine dry weather and feeling fairly warm as well, with highs of 22 Celsius down in the southeast. Into the evening, feeling quite chilly as soon as the sun goes down, likely to see some frost once again and some mist and fog, but still more in the way of cloud feeding into the northwest. And as we head into the next week, high pressure sticking around, so once again lots of fine, warm, sunny weather around.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your channel. Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. On today's show, Prince Harry turns 40, so what kind of a decade has it been for him? In my niggle, I'll explore. Would you welcome him back? Then, as Keir Starmer admits that his wife accepted free clothes from their biggest donor, are they just as bad as the Tories?
Their divisiveness, their cruelty, their robbing and their lies. Go there. StopTheTories.vote right now. See you there.
Yeah, awkward. The boss of the Charles Gordon Trust joins me later. In clickbait, was Mrs Thatcher right?
Socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them.
Labour seem intent on taxing to the hilt, but was Mrs T on the money? Before we get started, let's get your latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Home Office figures show 801 illegal migrants crossed the English Channel in 14 small boats yesterday. And that's as 8 migrants died overnight whilst trying to cross the Channel. 53 migrants were on board a boat which got into difficulty off the coast of northern France. Around 51 survivors were rescued. 6 were taken to hospital, including a 10-month-old baby suffering from hypothermia. The news comes less than 2 weeks after a separate incident where 12 migrants died after a boat sank off the French coastline. A murder investigation has been launched in East London after a woman was stabbed to death. Officers were called in the early hours of this morning to an address in Tower Hamlets with a 32-year-old woman since being arrested on suspicion of murder. A 37-year-old man was also arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. The Foreign Secretary has defended the Prime Minister following allegations that Sir Keir Starmer's broken parliamentary rules by failing to declare donations of clothing for his wife Victoria. The Sunday Times reports the gifts came from Labour donor Lord Ali and covered the cost of a personal shopper, clothes and alterations for the Prime Minister's wife during the election campaign.
This is not a breach of transparency rule. It's a Prime Minister that's acting positively to make sure that everything is above board. And this money comes from a long-standing, over 2 decades. Lord Ali has been in the House of Lords. He has been a big supporter of the Labour Party. He's a self-made man. And I think there is nothing to see here, really.
And there's more trouble for Sir Keir Starmer's government as it's revealed pensioners could be left £1,000 worth off this winter. This comes on top of suggestions that Labour could also axe the single-person discount on council tax at next month's budget. The party have thus far refused to rule this out, stating that difficult decisions need to be made in order to fill the so-called £22 billion black hole left by the Conservatives. Sir Ed Davey says the NHS cannot withstand Labour reforms without more funding. The Liberal Democrats leader made the comments during the second day of the Lib Dem party conference in Brighton today. Earlier this week, Sir Keir Starmer said the NHS will not get any more funding without reforming, as he laid out a 10-year plan to fix the health service. Sir Ed Davey says he's concerned the government's talking about reform before investment.
Been spent on the NHS, and in some areas there has.
But in many areas, there's not enough being spent. And at the election, we said in community health services, GPs, NHS dentists, community pharmacists, we said they've been underfunded. They don't have enough staff. That was our argument, and that's our argument now. And, you know, if you don't get more GPs, if you don't get more NHS dentists, if we don't open those community pharmacists, which are on the front line for many people's healthcare, people will end up going to hospital. That part of the problem has been so many people are going to hospital because we haven't got the primary care as strong as it needs to be.
And today is the Duke of Sussex's 40th birthday. The youngest son of the King will celebrate the start of his 40s at his Californian home with his wife Meghan and their children Archie and Lilibet. The Prince has said he was anxious to turn 30, but that he's excited about 40. And he says his mission is now doing good in the world. Earlier this morning, the ex-account for the royal family wished Harry a happy birthday in their first public message for the Prince since 2021. Today is the 84th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, a military campaign that was seen as a turning point of World War II. The British Royal Air Force fought the German Luftwaffe in the skies over the UK, with the Brits claiming a victory that is now commemorated each year on the 15th of September. A commemoration service took place earlier today to mark the anniversary, with both the Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, both in attendance. And finally, the crew of the first ever private spacewalk have returned to Earth today. Let's take a look at the moment that the SpaceX Dragon touched down.
And there you can see. As you can see on your screen, and by the cheers behind us, the Polaris Dawn crew has successfully splashed down.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Happy birthday, Harry. Prince Harry turns 40 today. So what kind of a decade has it been for him? 10 years ago, Harry was still a bachelor, enjoying his life on the London nightclub scene, fresh out of the army. On his 30th birthday, William threw a party for him at their father's house to celebrate the occasion. He seemed like a very happy man. He was loved by the British public. He was the sweetheart of the monarchy. Everybody adored him. He was that popular that even dressing up as a Nazi was forgiven. But in those 10 years, life has changed significantly for Harry. Enter Meghan Markle. Harry met Meghan when he was 32 and she was 35. Now, the story goes that they were on a blind date. Apparently, they were set up by a mutual friend who wishes to remain anonymous. Yeah, so would I. Don't blame them. But if reports are to be believed, according to numerous sources, the couple, Harry and Meghan, were a nightmare behind the scenes. Things turned sour, you know the rest, as a search for privacy on Oprah with an accusation of racism that was later denied. Netflix, Spotify, Spare, and the paperback is out soon with all the mean stuff still in it. And faux royal tours, much of which made money on the back of berating the royal family or using his status as a prince. During that time, Prince Philip died. Then the Queen, 2 years later. She never got to hear the denial of the racism accusation. Her final years must have been miserable with all the negativity that overshadowed the family. We had the coronation of Charles and now cancer diagnoses. The British public in the main turned on the couple. Harry has also and is still embroiled in a legal battle over his taxpayer-funded security when he travels to the UK, which he deems as too dangerous and also the reason he won't bring his wife and children to, although he's travelled to Nigeria and Colombia, arguably two of the most dangerous countries in the world, and managed to sneak into the UK undetected to attend a funeral. His children still have yet to meet all their grandparents or spend time and meet their nieces and nephews. No surprises that after all of that, there's little contact with William and Catherine, and other members of the royal family are now very weary of the pair. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that Meghan can be blamed for Harry's fall from grace. I hate it when people do that. Blame the woman. Harry's a grown man and responsible for his own behaviour, but I'm merely pointing out that things took a real slide shortly after she arrived on the scene. Last year, on his 39th birthday, Harry was ignored by the royal household. But this year, in an unexpected public message, the royal family's social media account said, wishing the Duke of Sussex a very happy 40th birthday today. Well, Harry is apparently spending today, his birthday, with his family, then going off into the mountains to reflect. Look, I sincerely hope he does reflect on all of this, and I hope that when he returns a wiser man and lets go of his inner angry child. Many happy returns, Harry. Happy birthday. Before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, as the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is reportedly looking to send migrants to Albania, I'm asking, are Labour the party of hypocrisy? And I'll also be asking, as elderly people are increasingly giving up and getting a GP appointment as they struggle to beat the 8 a.m. scramble, is Britain failing our pensioners? That is coming up in the next hour. As ever, send me your thoughts, post your comments, gbnews.com/your say. Well, I'm joined now by the editor-at-large of the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. Charlotte, you wrote a great piece in the Mail. Talk me through the 40 things that happened with regard to Prince Harry.
Well, I wrote a list of 40 people Harry has to make up with on his 40th birthday if he's to build bridges with the UK. And I think that there's a little bit of desire in him to build bridges in the UK and not necessarily come back here to work, but to feel that when he's here, he can connect with some of those 40 people. I mean, honestly, it got to the point at one stage where there are only 6 people really he was speaking to in the UK. And I think he's recognising that that era has to change. He can't just never come here, and he can't come here and be ignored by his family and friends or feel that he has to avoid them. The situation's untenable. So I just think now he's starting to build bridges. And that's actually what I'm hearing, is that he is starting to build bridges. And he's going on a big birthday holiday with some of his lad friends, I think some of which are from the UK. And I think we're seeing the beginning of the end of this unbelievable acrimony between him and his old life.
Well, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? But then, Charlotte, he's got his book coming out, the paperback version of Spare. That would surely be one of the things that maybe he could get rid of some of the mean stuff, like the bald patch on about his brother, and, you know, perhaps we don't want to hear about the frostbitten, the other bits. Do you know what I mean? Or Camilla is dangerous and stuff like that. If you really want to build bridges, whilst words are nice, actions would be better.
I think the royal family would love it if he just cancelled the paperback edition, but I just don't think that's possible. I think he's actually contractually obligated to bring it out. But it's only a tiny concession. But the publishers were very much expecting him to write another chapter, as often people do when they bring out a paperback version, an update. So since he wrote Spare, you know, you would expect him to write another 20 things that have gone wrong that he hates about his old life. But he didn't. He decided not to do an updated chapter or an intro or anything like that for the paperback edition. And this has been seen as a real concession and a real sort of admission that carrying on like that isn't helpful for him or for the royal family.
Well, there was news also of Meghan Markle. Apparently she regrets the way they left the UK. That was in Grazia. Do you believe there's any truth to that? Do you think that's all part of the rebuilding of the relationship?
I think there is. I think how could anyone, he'd had to have a heart of stone not to regret how it went down. I mean, I'm not saying they're accepting any blame for how it went down, but it was a disaster, their leaving. You know, their final event together as members of the royal family was unbelievably awkward to watch because William and Catherine just completely ignored them at a church service. And, you know, it was a very painful final day. She cried on that final day of being a working member of the royal family. So I imagine it's probably true there is some regret. And I actually think that Meghan will never really come here again. I just don't think that will happen. But I think Harry will. I think he'll spend a little bit more time here. I don't think he'll move from California or anything like that. But I think he regrets it, and I think he wants to repair a bit of the damage if he can.
Well, you know, Charlotte, a great pleasure as ever to talk to you. I'll believe it when I see it. You know, and also I think Meghan should perhaps go and maybe see her dad. That would be good, and that would probably work, you know, work miracles for her PR. Charlotte Christian, it's really good to talk to you. She is the editor of Large on the Mail on Sunday. You need to check out her piece that she wrote in it today. But now, Sir Keir Starmer is in hot water for allegedly breaking parliamentary rules. Yes, the Prime Minister faces a possible probe over not declaring clothing gifted to him and his wife Victoria. Prominent Labour donor Lord Ali reportedly covered the cost of a personal shopper, clothes and alterations for Lady Starmer before and after the election. Well, joining me now is former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. Ivor, this is not a good look, is it? Not a good look at all, especially as they are literally... They took their election victory on a stool of moral high groundness.
Hello, Nana. Look, last Tuesday, I understand that you know, Keir was told by various people in Number 10 that they had to do more to get all the information right for the authorities in the House of Commons. And as I understand it, he's now made numerous discussions with the authority in the House of Commons to make sure everything is right and proper. And given the way that the last 6 or 8 weeks have been for him as Prime Minister, including all those riots and everything else that he had to do, I think it's reasonable to expect that there could have been a delay. And I'm sure that when we hear more from the House of Commons authorities, it will be clear that there was something that he should have done, obviously, about the information that Wahid Ali had helped Keir get to in terms of what they needed in order to be the Prime Minister and his wife. And that means that they are on, as we saw, you know, recently, you know, with the President of the United States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there is always information like this where people try and make something out of it. And I saw that on one occasion earlier that one was a former Tory MP. Well, fair enough, he's entitled to say what he likes, but it doesn't mean that that's going to be the ultimate situation that occurs. The important thing with the authorities, just to finish this, Nana, the important thing with these authorities, I've been through this myself in previous times, is once they get the things sorted out, that's what they're trying to do, is to make sure that there is a proper resolution and that everyone knows what they're trying to achieve in that authority.
I'm sorry, Ivor, but there seems to be this desperate rush to kind of explain away any malpractice, as it were, because this is what this looks like. We don't have... That's just in my view. People are trying to just explain away. Sorry, let me finish. I did listen to what you had to say, so I'll just come in on that. It just seems that everyone's trying to make an excuse to this. He knows full well that he shouldn't be accepting donations and things like that because they berated the Tory party about it and about this, and the Tory party was supposed to be the party of sleaze, and now there we are seeing similar behaviour.
He was dealing with clothes in particular for his wife, who then needs different clothes, obviously, to go and be, you know, the wife of the Prime Minister. So there is an issue there, and I'm not quite sure what the issue is that you seem to be, or not you personally, Nana, seem to be getting very excited about in GB News. I have to say on at least two...
Well, let me just tell you the issue. He may have broken parliamentary rules in failing to declare the clothes bought for his wife by the Labour donor. So that's what people are saying, because he did literally stand on that step and say that he would not be sleazy. He will, you know, he's not going to be like the Tories. And, you know, what were the words that they used? I'm not trying to think of some of the words that they used to describe how he would be. And this is not what we're seeing.
But let me say this, Nana. What happens here is that the House authorities come to someone and say, we haven't heard from you about X, Y, and Z. And that's what's happened here. It happened last Tuesday. It wasn't something happening overnight. And it's clear since Tuesday that Keir has been making all the efforts that he needs to in order to make sure that this is resolved and that that he is doing the right thing in terms of the House authorities and where they expect to be.
Well,
so this has happened. This has happened.
They would never, I've run out of time, but listen, they would never allow that to be brushed under the carpet if it were the shoe were on the other foot, as they absolutely did that to the Tories. And they were right to hold the Tories to account, and now he needs to be held to account as well. Actions speak louder than words. Thank you very much, Ivor Kaplan. Thank you very much. A lack of trust can only be healed by actions, not words, is what was said here. So there you have it. Right, we're joined on the way. My panel will be back. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is Labour the party of hypocrisy? And this is as Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer could face an investigation for not declaring gifts given to his wife from a party donor amid rumours of plans to deport migrants to Albania. I remember what they thought about Rwanda. This is GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
With record temperatures expected this week, how do zoos keep their cooler creatures cold? Well, at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, the polar bears are enjoying a vegetable ice block.
Polar bears, they do have quite a variety of different temperatures that they naturally do find. Once they're moving off these polar ice caps, they are in the likes of down in the areas of Canada, Hudson Bay. Naturally, they were finding polar bears in 35-degree temperatures year upon year. So they are very much used to warm temperatures and heat waves as such. What you'll tend to find is they'll go for a good swim and then go for a snooze in the shade thereafter.
Not wanting to miss out, the sea lions are treated to a huge fish lolly.
In the hot weather, it's really important to give them ice because these guys, they don't drink salt water. These pools are actually saltwater pools. They actually drink fresh water. They've got 2 freshwater pools in their house, but again, being able to provide that in their outside enclosure is also really important. So offering them ice with their fish is not only enriching, but it's actually beneficial to their welfare as well.
Other animals like the lemurs will be basking in the sun, but also cooling down with frozen sweet potato.
So we've got 3 different species of lemur here. They come in all different shapes, colours, sizes, but they are native to Madagascar. Madagascar can get quite hot, understandably, so throughout the cold months here in Yorkshire, we do give them a nice heated house all year round, but especially making sure it's nice and warm in the winter for them. And it does mean that in the hot spells as well that we're able to keep our eyes on them and try and give them things that make them a bit more comfortable with that incoming hot weather as well.
The frozen food on offer here certainly has the seal of approval on what could be the hottest day of the year.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 22 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, joining me in my panel, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also GB News' political correspondent Nigel Nelson. If I made it up, are you political? You're not, are you?
Senior political commentator.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Well, that's good. Right, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Labour the party of hypocrisy? The Prime Minister is facing the investigation over an alleged breach of parliamentary rules for failing to disclose that Labour peer Lord Ali paid for a personal shopper and designed clothes for Keir's wife, Victoria. Also, reports today claim that the Prime Minister is considering processing migrants in Albania to replace Rwanda ahead of the talks with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, despite just only weeks ago calling the Rwanda scheme a gimmick.
The Rwanda scheme was dead and buried before it started. It's never been a deterrent, and I'm not prepared to continue with gimmicks that don't act as a deterrent.
So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, is Labour the party of hypocrisy? Let's see what Nigel and also Danny Kelly think of that. Nigel Nelson, let's start with the clothes, shall we? David Lammy's been trying to explain things away as if nothing to see here. But had this been the Tory party, you know what they did to the Tory party. And he called the decay of and decline of the Tories and all this stuff that he went on about, and yet there we are.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, the two parties just swapped roles.
They have.
So,
You're saying that now.
Labour is defending itself against the Tory attacks, and it was the reverse when the Tories were in government. On this particular issue, I do believe it was an oversight on behalf of Keir Starmer about not declaring it. The rules are incredibly complicated, and it gets very difficult to know what you're meant to say and what you're not meant to say. However, accepting clothes for your wife is a bad look. And I think that you have to have a lot of common sense about how you accept gifts and hospitality from other people. So hospitality is fine. You can't police every canapé he has at a reception or glass of wine. When it comes to gifts, I think it's a whole different ballgame. As a journalist, I'm happy to accept, say, a lunch from somebody.
OK, did you hear that, folks?
Yes, if anyone wants to take me for lunch.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I would never accept an expensive gift. I think that was a stage too far. It's just a common sense approach to what's OK and what's not OK. So in this case, football tickets, fine. Not sure about glasses. And certainly not expensive clothes for his wife.
I think the problem here is that he didn't declare it, so they accepted them. And then
he hasn't done anything wrong. Yes, I mean, it was just a declaration is the problem.
Yeah, but you also said it's complicated. I don't think it's complicated. I think it's quite simple. This is a person who donates money to your party, so if he's buying you lots of gifts and other things, it feels like gifts in kind, and if you haven't declared it, that looks pretty dodgy. Danny Kelly.
I think if anyone in the Labour Party needed a couple of £100 from Lord Daly, it's David Lammy to get some new shoes. The black training shoes he went over to America in, where I thought was a disgrace. I think Nigel's right. I think it's a terrible look. It doesn't matter. It's just an awful look. He's taken 300 knicker off nearly 1 million pensioners this winter. And I'm sure that his glasses were more than 300 knicker. Yeah. I'm sure that his wife's outfit were more than 300 quid. I just think it looks terrible, whether he's followed the protocol to the letter or whether he hasn't.
He hasn't.
It's awful.
Let's listen to David Lammy trying to defend him earlier today.
In our country, there isn't a budget for the Prime Minister's clothes or his wife's. I've just come back from America, where there is a substantial budget to ensure that the US President and the First Lady, their appearance can never be challenged. That is not the case in our country.
Oh, right, so 93 grand and all the benefits isn't enough to buy your own clothes. Really? I mean, whilst taking money from pensioners, and those with the broadest shoulders should carry the heaviest burden. That's what they've said. But yet there they are.
That excuse just doesn't hold any water. And also, GBNews played an earlier clip where Mr Lammy was saying that Lord Daly is self-made. So what?
I heard that,
What's that got to do with the fact that a multi-millionaire is throwing cash at the Prime Minister's wardrobe, his wife's wardrobe, and at the Prime Minister's eye furniture, and the Prime Minister's decent suits? I'm not going to say Savile Row. I don't know where he gets them made. But if they are tailored suits, they're not off the peg at Marks and Spencer's. And you can look smart in a £250 Marks and Spencer's suit. It doesn't have to be £2,500.
Well, they've got a lot of money and they get paid well. They've
He's minted.
Subsidised bars. He's already a millionaire. Subsidised bars, subsidised restaurants. What more do they want?
Well, I mean, I tend to agree with both of you on this one. I just don't think gifts are OK, provided... But I do think things like football tickets that people didn't like him actually taking, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
It's nothing. Why can't he pay? Look, he is there putting out policies. He said it's going to get worse until they get better, and blah, 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 blah. He's taxing everybody to the hilt. Yeah. They are swiping the winter fuel allowance from pensioners who desperately need it, some who don't, who give it to charity anyway, but the majority of pensioners, a lot of them probably do need it. He's taking that off them. In the meantime, he's not even spending his own money. And whilst he's not spending it, it's also not being declared that he's accepting these things for his wife. It's just a terrible...
Well, it will be declared, but it wasn't declared on time. And that's my point about why the rules are a bit complicated and why I think this is probably an oversight. Certainly there are people around Keir Starmer who are not happy about the things he's taken from Lord Ali.
Exactly.
And as we seem to all agree here, it is a bad look. However you cut it, it's a bad look to be taking expensive presents from anybody.
Well, you know, and what about Rwanda? They scrapped Rwanda.
Yep.
And now they're looking at Albania. They're asking Georgia Maloney about her plans, their plans using Albania.
Yep.
He called it a gimmick.
Well, no, it's a completely different thing.
It's not quite. It's very similar.
Well, it is totally.
There's a slight variance, but it's still a third-party processing centre.
It is a third-party process, but the difference was Rwanda, you would send people there and they never come back. The way that Italy does it with Albania is they send people to Albania for processing. If they are granted asylum during that process, the same thing that would happen here, they go back to Italy. So that's the big difference between the two.
But he called it a gimmick. So the concept, when somebody calls something a gimmick, it means the concept of that thing. Not the entire detail, but the concept of sending somebody to Rwanda is a gimmick.
The gimmick part of Rwanda was the idea it would become a deterrent. That's what he called a gimmick, and it was a very expensive gimmick.
Well, it's worked quite well for Italy, though, because they were having hundreds of thousands of migrants, and it's come down to about 40,000.
That's right.
Now. But so it has worked. It's not a gimmick.
Yes, but that isn't a gimmick because it's different. It is a different thing.
It's the concept of it, though. Sending them somewhere else is the deterrent.
The thing is, Nigel, he had no authority on whether it was going to work or not. I think a lot of people would have a lot more respect for Sir Keir Starmer if he hadn't have just scrapped Rwanda on day one. He said it's never going to work, it's not a deterrent, it's a gimmick. How the hell does he know? Well, because it was unprecedented.
It was, and the whole thing...
Yeah, but that's my point. When something is unprecedented, how can you say it's not going to work?
What was unprecedented about it was that the Permanent Secretary at the Home Office wouldn't sign it off as value for money because there was no evidence this would work.
It's unprecedented.
Well, exactly.
You'll never have
But if you start doing public policy based on, oh, that seems like a nice idea, let's go and spend 700 million to go and do it, it doesn't work.
All right, well, we'll keep this discussion going. Danny Kelly and Nigel Nelson, thank you very much. You're with me. Good afternoon. This is GBNews. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up in the next Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, as they struggle to beat the 8 a.m. scramble for an appointment, I'm asking, is Britain failing our pensioners? But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories this hour. Home Office figures show 801 illegal migrants crossed the English Channel in 14 small boats yesterday. That's as 8 migrants died overnight whilst trying to cross the Channel. 53 migrants were on board a boat which got into difficulty off the coast of northern France. Around 51 survivors were rescued and 6 were taken to hospital, including a 10-month-old baby suffering from hypothermia. This news comes less than 2 weeks after a separate incident where 12 migrants died after a boat sank off the French coastline. The Foreign Secretary has defended the Prime Minister following allegations that Sir Keir Starmer's broken parliamentary rules by failing to declare donations of clothing for his wife. The Sunday Times reported the gifts came from Labour donor Lord Ali and covered the cost of a personal shopper, clothes and alterations for the Prime Minister's wife during the election campaign.
This is not a breach of transparency rule. It's a Prime Minister that's acting positively to make sure that everything is above board. And this money comes from a long-standing, over 2 decades. Lord Ali has been in the House of Lords. He has been a big supporter of the Labour Party. He's a self-made man. And I think there is nothing to see here, really.
And today is the Duke of Sussex's 40th birthday. The youngest son of the King will celebrate the start of his 40s at his Californian home with his wife Meghan and their children Archie and Lilibet. The Prince has said he was anxious to turn 30, but he's excited about 40, and he says his mission is now doing good in the world. Earlier this morning, the ex-account for the royal family wished Harry a happy birthday in their first public message for the Prince since 2021. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, as we head into next week, we have high pressure building, so that means plenty of fine and dry weather around and some fairly warm days on offer too. For the end of the weekend, though, we do have this cold front which is slowly edging its way towards the southeast of the country, and that's bringing in some cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Now, as we head into the evening, there will still be some rain and drizzle towards the south, but it is generally easing and should just be largely cloudy, and that means it's going to be a fairly mild night compared to recent nights. To the north of this, though, plenty of clear skies and light winds, so we're likely to see some mist and fog develop overnight, particularly in northwestern parts. And it's going to be fairly chilly too, so in rural areas likely to see some spots of grass frost. So as I say, to start Monday morning, there should be plenty of fine, bright weather around, but there's likely to be some mist and fog in places as well, particularly in those rural spots. So even though there'll be bright sunshine, do take care for the Monday morning commute, particularly in northern parts of Wales, northwest England, where there could be some quite dense fog in places. Towards the south, a fairly cloudy start. Still could be the drips and drabs of rain and drizzle across hilly areas, but any mist and fog and cloud is generally going to be lifting and breaking through the course of the day as that high pressure builds, and that means plenty of fine and dry conditions to start the new working week. Perhaps a bit more high cloud in the northwest towards the end of the day, perhaps even seeing some rain and drizzle creeping into the Outer Hebrides, but otherwise plenty of fine dry weather and feeling fairly warm as well, with highs of 22 Celsius down in the southeast. Into the evening, feeling quite chilly as soon as the sun goes down, likely to see some frost once again and some mist and fog, but still more in the way of cloud feeding into the northwest. And as we head into the next week, high pressure sticking around, so once again lots of fine, warm, sunny weather around.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 36 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? You've missed half the show, but at least you're here now. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is Britain failing its pensioners? This is after weeks of backlash over cuts to winter fuel payments. It's now been revealed that elderly citizens are giving up getting help from GPs after struggling to get through to surgeries on the phone. I mean, it's just, you couldn't make this up. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Britain failing its pensioners? Right, well, joining me now to discuss, journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly, and also GB News senior commentator Nigel Nelson. Have I got it right now?
You missed the political in the middle.
Right, I'm going to Danny first.
I think there's a strong argument to say that it's failing nearly 1 million of its poorest pensioners. I think there's an argument to say that they're making people jump through hoops and having to go through very many pointed questions about whether they're actually eligible or not for the winter fuel support. And I've heard some horror stories on GB News and also on radio stations as I drive up and down the country of people who are just a couple of quid over the threshold. And let's not forget how important a couple of quid is to a lot of people, because the older you get, the more conscious you are of the money you have in the bank.
Because you can't go out and work.
We're all very fit and healthy and we're earning good dough. But when you're a pensioner, you're not. You may have a couple of bob coming in from a private pension, but then you're also worried about what the future holds. And this heating and eating, it's a cliche, but unfortunately it's one of life's gritty realities.
Yeah. Nigel Nelson.
Well, I mean, I agree with Danny there. I mean, I think we've said before, I'd have liked to have seen the winter fuel allowance rolled into the state pension so it could have been taxed, and richer pensioners would have then given a big chunk of it back so Rachel Reeves could still save money. I think the issue really is that you need to go an awful lot further than tinkering around with things like winter fuel allowance. That everything is designed for a bygone age when people lived to an average age of 69, and now we're living 20 years older. So that gives a huge extra cost on the state. Also means you've got to decide how you're actually going to live almost a third of your life in retirement. But yet we've got a system whereby 60-year-olds get free prescriptions. Why? Why shouldn't it be 66 on retirement age? They get free or concessionary travel in many areas. Same thing at 60. There are 1 in 3 men and 1 in 4 women over the age of 66 who are still doing some work. We're all healthier, so the result is that you can actually go on for longer, but they don't pay national insurance. So there's a question over whether we should do things in a different way. The worst of the lot is at 80, you get an extra 25p a week, which if you save up for a month will not even buy you a first-class stamp. Now, that still costs £40 million a year, but it's a derisory sum. It's a ridiculous sum. No one can do anything with 45p.
But it all adds up when you start removing winter fuel, then you take the 25p away, then you take away the bus pass, then you take away the single-person discount.
I'm not saying take it away.
But I'm just saying that these little things that you're saying, that it's a derisory sum, they could probably take that 25p off and they'd save 40 million.
Or increase it, or uprate it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So, but what we're seeing is a creep of sort of like a little piranha biting away at all the little things. When they say, oh, that's not very much, that's not very much. But when you add them up, they are a lot.
Yeah, the issue I'm making is that a lot of people have private pensions on top of their state pensions. They don't need things like winter fuel allowance. They use it for holidays, for buying crates of wine or whatever. All I'm arguing is to try and bring all those things into the tax system so those people give some of the money back.
Well, no, I hear you, but you could argue that MPs don't need their pay rise. They should put that back in the tax system. They're on £93,000 a year. It's IPSA who give him their pay rise, and some of them say, we don't need it, but we can't change it, because you could argue, actually, that Rachel Reeves should spend a week with a pensioner who is just over that threshold and doesn't get a chance to get that money. I think it's absolutely absurd.
The old Fleet Street coming out in Nigel there, holidays and crates of wine. That's where his dough goes.
Reduce the civil service. The civil service is over-bloated. They would save billions.
But, Nana, also, I think there was an announcement that pensioners are going to get a hike next year of 400-odd quid.
420 quid.
That's next year.
But you could argue with Keir Starmer, say, OK, Keir Starmer, why are you giving those pensioners who don't need the £300 winter fuel allowance, why are you stopping there, yet you're giving them another 420 quid? If they don't need it, if they don't need the 300, they won't need the 420.
That's the pension going up in line with earnings.
Correct, but what we're trying to do is save, I think, with the pensioners, £1.2 billion or something.
Yeah,
£1.4 billion. Yeah. So if you apply that same logic, that rationale, at wealthy pensioners who don't need this income, then why stop at those 1 million people who aren't going to get the 300
I think they're
quid?
literally they're taking money from the wrong places. It's all very petty, that on private schools, you know. It's all very petty, and actually a lot of it is counterproductive and doesn't really achieve the results they're expecting. And also, a lot of the things that they're attacking rely on other variables. So in order to make this money, they need to make sure, say, for example, VAT on schools, they need to make sure that this many people stay in schools to achieve this amount of money, but then it's not considered the after effect of the policy. So a lot of the consequences aren't being taken into account. I don't know why they don't fleece the civil service. That's where I'd be going. I'd be reducing the civil service. Why are they attacking pensioners? That's what I'm seeing.
Well, I mean, Rachel Reeves needed 1.44 billion instantly, and there's no way of getting it any other way. I cannot think of another way you could raise it.
Why did she need it instantly,
Well,
like tomorrow?
That is exactly the question I wish Rachel Reeves would answer.
She should answer it.
She's made the point that she needed this money now, so she couldn't put it off till next year. That would have been a way of doing it through the tax system. I do think she's got to explain in some detail why it was necessary now, and equally also explain this 22 billion black hole, which the Treasury are refusing to give the full details of. It's time they did.
Well, it's not a good look.
The net zero is costing us how many billion?
It's not a good look at all.
With Miliband, we're ploughing 8 or 10 billion pounds.
We'll talk about net zero.
International commitments.
Well, we're talking about that because it looks like they're maybe backtracking on their 2030 targets as well. But of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. As welcome our Great British Voice onto the show. Their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Let's go to Francis in Salisbury. Francis, welcome. Francis, what do you think about this? I mean, are we giving our pensions a very bad and raw deal here?
Very. I think it's spiteful, to be honest. When you look at the reductions or the taking away of winter fuel allowance, you've got Ed Miliband rushing ahead, pushing up prices for electricity. You know, I don't think this Labour government understands basic economics, nor does it understand cash flow. Because it's no good saying, oh, well, you'll get an RPI or whatever increase in April when you've got to pay a bill now to stay alive.
Well, very briefly then, did you vote for them, yes or no?
No.
Yeah. Let's bring in Fergus then from Greenwich. Fergus, he's my Great British Voice. Well, Fergus, do you think they're being a bit... I mean, Francis has said they're kind of been a bit vindictive, they're being a bit spiteful, haven't they?
Well, very. I'm 74. I've had cancer. I've lost over 3 stone of weight. My diabetes has gone away, but I really feel the cold now. I really feel it. So I have to wrap myself in a duvet all the time. And then when I see Starmer's wife has got £70,000 worth of clothes, I think, hang on, I haven't had £70,000 worth of anything. I'm actually suffering. I have to wrap myself in a duvet. My electricity bill's gone up, and it's going to go up higher because they're going to take away my freedom pass as well. So I won't be able to get to the big shops. I walk with a trolley. I've got disabled badge in my car because I can hardly drive now. So what do I do with this government? The old ones were bad enough, but these are worse. That's all I can say.
Well, did you vote for them, Fergus?
No, of course not.
Oh, God. What do we do about this?
I voted for Martin Daubney's party, put it that way.
Oh, I see. I hear you. I hear you. What would you like to hear Sir Keir Starmer say with regard to that? Francis, what would make it better for you? What does Sir Keir Starmer and his party, what do they need to say?
He's got to get a bit more joined up, to be honest. At the moment, they seem to be rolling out policies here, there, everywhere, just to look as if they're being impressive, when they're not being impressive, because nothing's joined up. They are, to my view, economically ruining this country. We're seeing, I think, an economic disaster coming because they call growth, 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 and yet every single policy is anti-growth.
All right, well, listen...
Sustain our pension population.
Really good to hear your thoughts, Francis and Fergus. Thank you very much for joining me. This is my Great British Voice. It's right. It's 46 minutes after 4 o'clock here with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. Coming up in the next hour for my Great British Debate, I'm asking, is the dream of net zero by 2030 dead in the water? Stay tuned.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast.
every day from 6 a.m.
An army veteran has become the world's most tattooed woman after a 10-year journey to ink 99.98% of her body. I mean, that's really nearly everywhere. But I wonder, I mean, yes, she is unusual, and you'd know her if you met her, frankly, wouldn't you? But are tattoos acceptable they're becoming more and more acceptable just amongst all of us, aren't they? But what about in the workplace?
99.98% of her body tattooed. Do you think this would affect the way that she is received at work?
I do affect it would how she is seen at work, just purely because tattoos are still so stigmatised in the workplace. In today's rapidly evolving society, the traditional standards of what is socially acceptable are being redefined. Facial tattoos, full body tattoos, once stigmatised, are increasingly seen as a form of personal expression, and there shouldn't be a barrier to one's professional or social life.
If you are going for a job, for instance, we make up 90% of our minds about somebody within the first 3 seconds. And I have written a book on body language, and the face is just so important. You need to have the smile, you need to be able to read the facial expression, even when we're speaking. Now, if the face is really heavily tattooed, you can't do that.
Jade said that there is still this stigma, particularly to facial tattoos. We do judge people with tattoos, don't we?
We do. Unfortunately, we do, because it's not the norm. And as a human being, we tend to judge what is not the norm. And as Jade says, we are getting much more used to it. It is much more socially acceptable. But a lot of firms will say, if you've got a tattoo, you cover it. We don't want tattoos in the workplace.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 51 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, lots of people have been in touch on gbnews.com/you'll say. Wendy says, Nana, the Green Institute in London paid Rachel Reeves and Ed Miliband £90,000 each to push the net zero agenda. There is so much sleaze within the Labour Party. They are hypocrites. No, I don't have any evidence of that, so I don't know whether that's true. But that's what Wendy is saying. Wonder, Wendy, where did you see that? I'm going to do some research on it. Hatter says, I have to make a speech tomorrow at my local camera club. Can Starmer's mate help with the wife's cocktail dress? Nigel Nelson, let's all roll our eyes. Senior what? I don't understand what that means. I've something rude, I probably have. And Brian says, we need and should have proof of this £22 billion black hole, for the government refused to show the evidence. They then removed the winter fuel allowance without doing an impact assessment. These things should be published now, or are the government lying? Well, it's a very good question. But what do you think? gbnews.com/you'll say keep them coming. But should we cut the civil service jobs as well? Because, look, they're slashing everything. What about that? Conservative leadership race frontrunner Robert Jenrick thinks so. He told The Telegraph that he wants the service back at 2015 staffing levels in order to achieve a small state that works. And that's a whopping 120,000 taxpayer-funded jobs. Joining me now, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Nigel Nelson, I'll come to you. Is it time that we cut some civil service jobs? I was saying it earlier. It's bloated, it's expensive. Is Robert Jenrick right?
Well, it's just that it's such a knee-jerk reaction. Every time you want to save money and talk about small state, you say, "Oh, let's slash the civil service." And certainly there may be jobs that can go. You do it by natural wastage, but the issue here is obviously how much money it would save.
All right, well, let's find out, because joining me now, former MEP Robert Jenrick supporter David Campbell-Bannerman. David, welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining us. Is Robert Jenrick onto something here? There's a lot of money, a lot of people. Do we really need them?
Well, I think it's a very sensible move forward. I mean, the reality is under Cameron, we had a civil service of just under 400,000, 392. And all he's saying is it's 513,000 now. We need to get back to that level. We've got past Brexit, we've got past COVID. Let's get back to that lower level.
Well, yeah, how much does the civil service cost us, though, at this? It must be billions. Rachel Reeves could save a fortune if she sort of targeted her attack there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem you've got is a kind of ratchet effect, as I call it, is that, when the numbers go up, the public service unions, the public sector unions under Labour, resist the cut. We should be losing about 120,000, just in order to get back to where we were before. And there was no loss of efficiency. There wouldn't be a loss of efficiency as a result. So it's a perfectly reasonable proposal. It isn't actually some sort of extreme right-wing proposal. It is actually just a sensible cut, especially at a time when, as you say, there's a lot of pressure on the public sector and on public sector funding.
Yeah. Well, listen, David Campbell-Bannerman, apologies that we have to leave it there because we are running out of time, sadly. But it's really good to talk to you. We'll have to get you on and talk to you for a lot longer next time. But I love your views. Keep them coming. gbnews.com/you'll say. It seems that the GB News viewers are way more intelligent than the government. That's how it goes. That's how we roll. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. On the way, we have the interview. I'll be speaking to a remarkable man who took himself from poverty and homelessness to a multi-million-pound property and a successful music business. That's next.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, as we head into next week, we have high-pressure buildings. That means plenty of fine and dry weather around and some fairly warm days on offer too. For the end of the weekend, though, we do have this cold front which is slowly edging its way towards the southeast of the country, and that's bringing in some cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Now, as we head into the evening, there will still be some rain and drizzle towards the south, but it is generally easing and should just be largely cloudy, and that means it's going to be a fairly mild night compared to recent nights. To the north of this, though, plenty of clear skies and light winds, so we're likely to see some mist and fog develop overnight, particularly in northwestern parts. And it's going to be fairly chilly too, so in rural areas likely to see some spots of grass frost. So as I say, to start Monday morning, there should be plenty of fine, bright weather around, but there's likely to be some mist and fog in places as well, particularly in those rural spots. So even though there'll be bright sunshine, do take care for the Monday morning commute, particularly in northern parts of Wales, northwest England, where there could be some quite dense fog in places. Towards the south, a fairly cloudy start. Still could be the drips and drabs of rain and drizzle across hilly areas, but any mist and fog and cloud is generally going to be lifting and breaking through the course of the day as that high pressure builds, and that means plenty of fine and dry conditions to start the new working week. Perhaps a bit more high cloud in the northwest towards the end of the day, perhaps even seeing some rain and drizzle creeping into the Outer Hebrides, but otherwise plenty of fine dry weather and feeling fairly warm as well, with highs of 22 Celsius down in the southeast. Into the evening, feeling quite chilly as soon as the sun goes down, likely to see some frost once again and some mist and fog, but still more in the way of cloud feeding into the northwest. And as we head into the next week, high pressure sticking around, so once again lots of fine, warm, sunny weather around.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. On today's show, we talked about Prince Harry, who turned 40. So what kind of a decade has it been for him? And would you welcome him back? Then, as Labour backtracks on its electric car commitments, is the dream of net zero by 2050 coming to an end?
Their divisiveness, their cruelty, their robbing and their lies. Go there. StopTheTories.vote right now. See you there.
But are the Labour Party turning out to be just as bad? Then the boss of the Charles Gordon Trust joins me later. And in clickbait, was Mrs Thatcher right?
Socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them.
Labour seem intent on taxing to the hilt, but was Mrs T on the money? Before we get started, let's get your latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nana, thank you, and good afternoon. The top story this hour. Home Office figures show 801 illegal migrants crossed the English Channel in 14 small boats yesterday. That's a record daily number since Labour came into power and brings the total who've crossed this year to over 23,200. And that's as 8 migrants died overnight whilst trying to cross the Channel. 53 migrants were on board a boat which got into difficulty off the coast of northern France. And around 51 survivors were rescued and 6 were taken to hospital, including a 10-month-old baby suffering from hypothermia. The news comes less than 2 weeks after a separate incident where 12 migrants died after a boat sank off the French coastline. A murder investigation has been launched in East London after a woman was stabbed to death. Officers were called in the early hours of this morning to an address in Tower Hamlets, with a 32-year-old woman since being arrested on suspicion of murder. A 37-year-old man was also arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has defended the Prime Minister following allegations that Sir Keir Starmer's broken parliamentary rules by failing to declare donations of clothing for his wife. The Sunday Times reported the gifts came from Labour donor Lord Ali and covered the cost of a personal shopper, clothes and alterations for the Prime Minister's wife during the election campaign.
This is not a breach of transparency rule. It's a Prime Minister that's acting positively to make sure that everything is above board. And this money comes from a long-standing, over 2 decades. Lord Ali has been in the House of Lords. He has been a big supporter of the Labour Party. He's a self-made man. And I think there is nothing to see here, really.
There's more trouble for Sir Keir Starmer's government as it's revealed pensioners could be left £1,000 worse off this winter. This comes on top of suggestions that Labour could also axe the single-person discount on council tax at next month's budget. The party have thus far refused to rule it out, stating that difficult decisions need to be made in order to fill the so-called £22 billion black hole left by the Conservatives. Sir Ed Davies says the NHS cannot withstand Labour reforms without more funding. The Lib Dems leader made the comments during the second day of the Lib Dem party conference in Brighton today. Earlier this week, Sir Keir Starmer said the NHS will not get any more funding without reforming, as he laid out a 10-year plan to fix the health service. Sir Ed Davies says he's concerned that the government is talking about reform before investment.
Been spent on the NHS, and in some areas there has, but in many areas there's not enough been spent. And at the election, we said in community health services, GPs, NHS dentists, community pharmacists, we said they've been underfunded. They don't have enough staff. That was our argument, and that's our argument now. And, you know, if you don't get more GPs, if you don't get more NHS dentists, if we don't open those community pharmacists, which are on the front line for many people's healthcare, people will end up going to hospital. That part of the problem has been so many people are going to hospital because we haven't got the primary care as strong as it needs to be.
Today is the Duke of Sussex's 40th birthday. The youngest son of the King will celebrate the start of his 40s at his Californian home with his wife Meghan and their children Archie and Lilibet. The Prince has said he was anxious to turn 30, but he's excited about 40, and he says his mission is now doing good in the world. Earlier this morning, the ex-account for the royal family wished Harry a happy birthday in their first public message for the Prince since 2021. And today is the 84th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, a military campaign that was seen as a turning point of World War II. The British Royal Air Force fought the German Luftwaffe in the skies over the UK, with the Brits claiming a victory that is now commemorated each year on the 15th of September. A commemoration service took place earlier today to mark the anniversary, with both Sir Keir Starmer and former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in attendance. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. This is GB News, live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. First of all, birthday wishes are pouring in for Prince Harry as he turns 40. Prince and Princess of Wales' official social media accounts posted a message to mark the milestone. But is it enough to end Harry and William's sibling rift? Plus, I'll be joined by an entrepreneur who's gone from rags to riches. Charles Gordon will share his journey to success and offer some insights into the world of business. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the dream of net zero by 2050 a dead in the water? Labour are already planning to U-turn on the total ban of new petrol-fuelled cars by allowing hybrid vehicles to remain on the market until 2035. As ever, send me your thoughts, post your comments, gbnews.com/your say. So, top story, of course, today, Prince Harry turns 40. It's his 40th birthday. Wishes are pouring in. The King and Prince William's social media accounts posted to the well wishes to mark the occasion. But is this the olive branch the UK and the Prince Harry actually need? Royal biographer Alexander Larman joins me now. Alexander, thank you very much for joining me. Is this it? Is this an olive branch to Prince Harry?
Good afternoon, Nana. And no, it's not, is the simple answer. I mean, if you look at just how tokenistic it is, for both the royal family and the Prince and Princess of Wales' social media accounts, it's basically that's not saying anything, are they? I mean, let's not see this as anything other than a pleasantry, a small public gesture being done because they feel that they have to. So, no, this isn't the beginning of a reconciliation. I mean, Harry and his brother are very, very much estranged. And apparently Harry and the King are completely estranged as well, if we believe today's papers. So as he's turning 40 in Montecito, I think he can be reflecting on the fact that he is as far away from his family, both literally and metaphorically, as it's possible to be.
really, but for the last 2 years or so, the royal family didn't post anything on social media for his birthday. So surely there is a slight level of thawing of relations, especially even from us as an outside observer looking in.
No, I really don't think so. I think that this is just a pleasantry. This is just something being done because otherwise, if they didn't do it, they might be criticised for it. I mean, Harry is still the king's son. He is still the brother of the future king. I mean, this is a very small gesture. What was interesting about the Prince and Princess of Wales's retweet of that message is that usually when a tweet is done from one of them, it's signed with their initials, and this one wasn't. And I think what you can take from that is this is all very tokenistic. This is lip service alone, being paid to the idea that it's his birthday, so we have to say something. But no, this is not the beginning of a rapprochement. This is business as usual.
But Harry was recently supposedly quoted as saying that if the king needed him, then he would be back to perform some royal duties if he was needed.
Well, Harry can say what he likes, frankly, because at this stage he has been such an embarrassing presence of the royal family. He has done so many dreadful things, so many embarrassing and so many ill-thought-out things over the last 4 or 5 years that we don't want him back. I mean, this is the whole point. It's that he is now in Montecito. He is living in his very luxurious bed, and he can lie in it, frankly, because what he's done to the reputation of the royal family is more than anybody since his great-great-uncle, the Duke of Windsor. He has absolutely ruined the royal family in all its standing. And you just think to yourself, why do you persist in this facade? Why do you persist in this idea that you would come back and do service? Because it was your decision to leave Britain. It was your decision to go off and cause embarrassment to the royal family. And so now we see that there's going to be a new Netflix documentary produced by him and Meghan coming out in December about polo. You just think, can't you just give it a rest? I mean, it's just, can't you just go off and enjoy a happy private life without having to bother the rest of us?
Well, he was in search of privacy, wasn't he? Which started with an interview with global megastar Oprah Winfrey. You know, I feel like I want to hear that they are, perhaps coming together and there's some sort of reunion of some sorts. But to be fair, Meghan has still to yet even speak to her or see her father.
Well, Meghan won't come back to Britain because it's not safe for her. You see, Nigeria is fine. I mean, that's absolutely above board. But the streets of London, no, she couldn't possibly do that. So, no, I mean, I just feel that we are fed a lot of disinformation from Camp Sussex. And we're fed, I mean, I'm still amazed that Harry has friends who are willing to go off the record and speak for him, because his behaviour is essentially betrayal. It's betrayal of his family, but it's betrayal of everyone around him as well. So whether you blame him, or if you blame his wife, or in my case, if you blame both of them equally, thus apportioning an equal amount of blame and shame. But you just think to yourself, how long is this going to go on? The answer is, it's probably going to go on as long as they live, because I can't see any rapprochement between him and William being a possibility. I mean, they went to Lord Fellas's funeral service quite recently and didn't say a word to each other. And you just think, well, if you're not going to speak to each other if you're in the same room, why would you have any contact in any other way?
Especially at a funeral as well, where you are reminded of your own mortality. So this would probably be a good point and a good time to try and maybe make some sort of amends to people, just in case, do you know what I mean? But it doesn't seem that anything is sacred to them. But he's going to be off in the mountains or something after he's had a family get-together with his wife and children. That's what we're hearing.
Well, the mountains are probably the best place for him, to be honest with you. And I mean, if he decided just to get lost in them and become a goat herd, well, I think that the world might be a better place for that, to be quite frank.
Well, listen, Alexander, really good to talk to you. That's royal biographer Alexander Larman. Well, I love that. He's great, isn't he? I love that. Well, joining me now, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly.
Do you know, that was really interesting because he shed a different light on it for me, and he's suggesting, that gentleman's suggesting, and understandably, that this happy 40th birthday, Harry, and this announcement is more of a formality because it's a landmark birthday. And if they hadn't have done it, they'd have been conspicuous by its absence. So they had to make some sort of, if you want to use it, an olive branch, if you want to use it, a thawing out process. But maybe it's neither. Maybe it is literally a formality of saying happy 40th birthday, because they didn't do it when he was 39 and they didn't do it when he was 38.
That's true, and it may well be that. There may be the sort of royal protocols for doing these things. I think that William and Kate didn't actually have to do that retweet because it was good enough for the royal family to have sent the original birthday greetings. They're part of the royal family. They could have done it that way. I thought it was significant that William and Kate then added their own best wishes to that. I mean, something that Alexander was talking about, that he's obviously not a great Harry fan. No. But he was talking about what Harry's got coming up and things like doing the Polo series for Netflix, where Harry's the executive producer on that. Well, he was contracted to do that. I mean, he is actually making his living. He's fulfilling a deal he made with Netflix, whatever you think about it, whether you think he should have done or not. So I don't think he can really be criticised for coming out of the woodwork to go and deal with that.
Yeah, well, listen, lots of you have been getting in touch with your views on all the subjects we've been discussing throughout the show. I just want to read some of them because I think, again, you've provided me with some great comment, and I absolutely, many of them I agree with. Victor says, and this is with regard to civil servants and saving money, he says, easy to save money, simply cut 100k civil servants' jobs, many of which are not real jobs. The same goes to the local council staff, many occupying non-jobs. Just take a look at the job ads in the I can't remember, I think he means The Guardian, but he's called it something else. It would take a genius to work out what exactly the job entails. You can be sure it pays £60,000 plus per year. Simple way, we weed out the dross, order them back to work. Those that refuse, sack them. Oh, and I do not recall ever reading that thousands of civil servants now working from home had to forfeit their London waiting allowances, which was meant to cover the additional costs of commuting. Yeah, you see, I'm with you. There's so many ways they could do it rather than actually taking it from pensioners. Well, listen, stay with me because up next I'm joined by an entrepreneur who's gone from rags to riches. Charles Gordon will share his journey to success and offer some insights into the world of business. That's next.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Did you know several Paralympic GB track and field athletes are aiming to go for gold this summer in Paris? So aside from pure talent, a British firm has incorporated, get this, space technology in the materials of running clothes to help athletes perform at their ultimate capacity. I'm not sure if I believe this, but we'll find out in a sec. Trailblazing scientists, engineers and designers at British firm Rion Labs have taken an idea first used in a NASA project and they've now developed it for over 15 years at Imperial College in London.
First of all, please can you explain to us a bit more about how and what this incredible technology is?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, our founder, Dr. Dan Plant, spent many years developing these kind of dynamic materials. That means they behave in what's called non-Newtonic way. So they don't follow the rules. Effectively, they can change their behavior depending on kind of stress or stretch you apply to it. So what you get on an athlete level, if you imagine you have a garment, it's supercharged. It's such that the garment changes its support depending on your movement or your activity or the speed at which you run.
So you're saying that it generates, what, more sort of kinetic energy, is that right?
Not quite. It makes you effectively make more out of your own energy. Spot the athletes with the wavy curves and stripes, you'll see that. So that's super polymer we have in combination with these stripes that are kind of built around the way your muscles moves.
You said the difference between first and fourth place is a fraction of a percent.
Yeah, that's the main difference it makes. So even if you manage to kind of make more of your own energy and improve your performance by 1%, that's the difference between podium and non-podium.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just 17 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's now time for this week's interview. My guest this week is a remarkable man who went from poverty and homelessness to a multi-million-pound property and successful music business. Not to mention the man behind an award ceremony of which we have a lot to discuss. I'm joined, I'm pleased to say, by entrepreneur and author Charles Gordon. Charles, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's good to see you. So tell me a little bit about your story and your journey.
OK, well, where do I start? So I started in business when I was 19 years old. And what I found was, coming from certain backgrounds, a lot of things weren't afforded to me as they were in certain other environments. Working against the odds and doing what we needed to do, it got us to a place in business where by the time I was 21, 22, we'd moved into property development. And we were doing very well, very well, turning over literally, I think it was a few million a year, but about 23, 24. But in fairness, these were things that I was always led to believe were impossible, coming from a socially economic deprived background, let's say. So, I mean, one of the thought processes for me, and one of the reasons why we went on to do the awards, was to kind of create more entrepreneurs and try and help people understand what can be achieved. And I think in a lot of circumstances, when the odds are stacked against you, they say diamonds are formed in high pressure. So I think there's a lot of people that don't understand what they're capable of. And one of the things that I wanted to do was kind of acknowledge the people that are doing amazing things in our society. And the other aspect was to kind of show other people that it can be done, because I think that was a lot of things that go against us is the fact that we don't believe we can do it. So the mindset was that that's a mindset to me that we needed to try and change.
So were you born in this country? Where were you born?
Yeah, born in South London.
You grew up in South London?
Grew up in South London.
What was that like? What was your growing up like?
Do you know what? I mean, yeah, there's always challenges, I think. I mean, I wasn't from a background with a silver spoon, let's say. And what I found was, because even going into business, psychologically, I think in certain environments, music is an option because you see it. Sports is an option because you see it. Business wasn't an option because I couldn't visualise that for myself, because it wasn't something that I saw. So it was going against the odds, I think, that made it. And that in itself, I think, was a bit of a mind. It was. For me, I think even when I started in business, it was a very stressful period, because subconsciously and psychologically, even I didn't believe I could do it, if that makes sense.
Of course.
And then as I started to achieve it, I was like, well, hold on a minute, I've been lied to.
So you started in business, you went to a normal school in the UK.
Yep.
You started in business,
yep.
And this was in the property side of things? Did you buy a house? Or
no, the initial starting was, I started in property lettings and management, actually. So we bought it, literally, I mean, I kind of left home quite early. I was told categorically when I was in school that I was unemployable. So in my mind, subconsciously, I wasn't going to be able to get a job. So I decided the only option that was available to me was to go into business for myself. So then it was a case of, what do I go into business doing? And the biggest thing that you could buy and sell effectively was property. I didn't really see myself as a car salesman, and that was the next one down on the list. So I went in there, I had no idea what I was doing. I opened my office, I negotiated the terms on the lease. It was a small office. And then as I got into it and started to actually rent properties and sell properties and property letting management at the time, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And then as we started going, and I think there's a few simple principles that you need to do, but in business, one of the key things is just dealing with people as you want to be dealt with. And I found that went a very, very long way, and it set the foundations effectively for everything that then followed after. And yeah, it was more about just kind of finding your feet, working out, and then because I hadn't done it and hadn't had any education in that arena, it was a case of trying to work out the best way forward, the best way to understand it. And it was all about, for me, I did it from a very practical standpoint of customer service and taking care of your customers. And then as a result, the business literally snowballed in a very short space of time.
So you had a rental sort of property business, you were like a letting agent?
Yeah, I was 19.
19?
When I started it, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was good fun.
It was good fun.
Yeah.
So then what happened to that business? Do you still have it? What went?
Yep, still in the property game. So over the years, I mean, I went in from, I kind of look at business as video games. So I kind of take it on different stages and different levels to qualify. So I think initially we started in lettings and management, then we moved into property sales coming out of the recession. And then from there we moved into property development. So I started buying properties, converting it into flats and so on and so forth. And then moved on to new builds and started building them from the ground up. And just literally, it was just qualifying each stage. And then when I got to the new builds and started doing that, then I was bored, so I needed a new game to play.
So
that's when I ventured into the music industry.
So what in the music industry? Talk to me about that.
So it was mainly about developing acts. So what we did is we take the act, we put the act together, so we'd kind of deal with the styling, the recording and everything else, and then license it onto a major label. So we dealt with a few acts over the years, and one of the main ones we did was Big Brothers, and we also dealt with we created that Booty Love from Big Brothers as well. So we had quite a few success stories in the music game, which was good fun. But it was the property industry is quite an ethical industry where people do what they say they're going to do. The music industry was the Wild West, yeah.
Totally different. That's a tough one to crack, though. That really is.
It wasn't a tough one to crack, but what I didn't like was all of the negative aspects of it. There's quite a lot of underhanded behaviour in the music industry, I think, whereas in property, people are kind of a lot more straightforward. Yeah. So as a waking up every day, what am I comfortable doing? I was a lot more comfortable with property. So
how did you get involved in the Charles Gordon Awards then? Because this is what happened.
Yeah, so I think the main issue that I saw was in society, I think across the board, whenever there's anything bad that happens, there's a huge emphasis on it. And what I think happens, especially in socially or economically deprived areas, the only way that people are really going to make a success of themselves is ultimately by doing bad or being seen to be doing bad. And I think that in itself, to me, sits as a core problem. So what I wanted to do with the awards was kind of highlight the good. So it was more about looking at all of the people that are doing amazing things in society and basically putting some recognition on them so that people can aspire to be good as opposed to aspiring to be bad, because I think that's a major part of why people do what they do. And I think if you see things, you can achieve them. And I don't think there's enough emphasis on the good that people do. I mean, in sports, you see it on TV. Music, again, you see it, but you don't see it in business. You don't see it in all of the... There's so many different environments that people are doing amazing things at a social level. So even down to taking care of the homeless and things like that. But they don't get any money for it. And my reasoning was, if they don't even get any acknowledgement for it, why are they going to carry on? And those are the people that really create the kind of core of our society, because it's those, for want of a better phrase, do-gooders, that make society a nicer place, let's say. And I don't think there's enough, I don't think they get enough for it, so that was one of the main reasons. But then at the same time, I figured an award ceremony purely around that wouldn't be as interesting, so then that's when we brought in the celebrity element. So it's kind of, I think if I had to describe the awards, it would be kind of Mobo / Pride of Britain, is kind of where we're at with it.
I see. And it was a very interesting ceremony, which I didn't manage to get to because I work. It's like I work on the weekend. I work on the weekend. Yes, but you had quite a few different categories on that award ceremony.
Yes. It was an amazing turnout. We had about 1,500 people, I think, on the night. It was an amazing turnout. We had a lot of categories. We had performances from So Solid. We had Omar there. We had I can't remember.
Richard Blackwood hosting it.
Richard Blackwood hosting. Kaz Cosley was also on the show as a co-host. I mean, it was an amazing night. We had a really good time, And while I'm mentioning that, it's because on the night, I don't know, well, I'm sure you're aware that you received our TV Presenter Excellence Award. But you weren't able to make it. So what I've done is I've brought it with me, and I have it here. And I'd like to formally present this to you. All right?
Get my hair a bit at the back.
And here you go, my darling.
Thank you very much.
Formally accept your TV Presenter Excellence Award from the Charles Gordon Trust.
Or a speech. I'd like to dedicate this to myself. I need to cry now as well, because that's what people do. But there were quite a lot of people in this category, though, weren't there?
Yes.
It was voted for by the people.
You know what? You did amazing. If I'm honest, from memory, I think it was you received in excess of 8,000 votes.
No.
Yep.
From the public voting for me.
From the public, yep. And that's one of the major parts actually. The way these awards are structured is people are nominated. Once they're nominated, it goes to a public vote, and whoever wins the public vote gets the award. And yeah, I think you won it by a landslide. It wasn't
really.
It wasn't even a small amount.
Oh my God! Thank you so much.
I know you did amazingly well. And we've also, because you weren't there to celebrate with us on the night, we figured we'd just also provide you with something to celebrate with.
Oh wow!
Which
Look
comes
at that.
fully equipped with brochures and all sorts. But yeah, it's your own bottle of Dom Perignon.
Dom Perignon. Oh, I don't think I've ever had one of those. Thank you.
Vintage bottle, I might add.
Oh my God! I want to drop it on my way out. You know, that's the sort of that's how I roll. Oh, this is stunning. Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you so much for bringing in and coming in and doing me the award.
And thank you for doing the amazing work that you're doing, because it's important. I think that I think it's important for other people to see what can be achieved and what can be done. And I think the more people that are setting the pace, the more people then follow in their footsteps, and that's what creates the next generation.
Wow, so 8,000, loads of people. Thank you so much, people, for voting for me. I do appreciate that. That's amazing. Look at this. Look at this. Yeah. I'm not one of those people that goes, oh, it was so sad. I'm like, yeah, bring it on. Yeah. And if I had lost, I would have gone, there would have been an angry face.
Oh, okay. No, that's allowed. That's allowed.
There would have been a face.
We've got to want to win. We've got to want to win, otherwise why play?
Exactly. So what's next for you then, Charles?
Well, we've got another award ceremony coming up next year. I mean, we're also, with the Trust, another thing that for me was one of the core parts is education. So we're in the process now of setting up what we've called the Boss Academy, which is the Business Opportunity Superstar. And it's kind of like, I think, Apprentice meets Dragon's Den. So we're going to be basically taking students, filming them for the whole year while they're doing the studying. It'll be a practical education on business, because our objective is to create the next generation of entrepreneurs. So we don't just want to teach them, we want to give them a practical out at the end. So at the end of the course, we're working in association with Pentecostal Credit Bank.
Amazing.
And they'll be funding the business ideas of the individuals. And then the award ceremony we're doing in July next year. So we've opened nominations for that now as well. So yeah, we've got a lot doing. We've got a lot doing. The plan is to just keep it busy and keep it moving.
Well, thank you very much, Charles. It's so good of you to come in, and thank you very much for my award. Thank you to the people who voted for me. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to my mum, my dad, GBNews for giving me the platform, and everybody who's watching and listening right now. Thank you so much. And thank you, Charles, for coming in to see me.
Having me.
Thank you so much. Well, listen, good luck with everything. If people want to get involved, is there a website or somewhere they can go?
Yes. So cgtawards.co.uk is the awards for nominations. So anyone like yourself or anyone who they feel needs to be acknowledged for the work they're doing in the community, get on board and nominate them. If they want to get involved in the university aspect, the Boss University, I think that's bossuni.co.uk. I could be wrong, but they're all through the Charles Gordon Trust website anyway. So if we click on that, then it'll take us hopefully to everywhere they need to go. All right.
Listen, Charles, thank you so much for coming in to join me. Thank you so much for my award. Listen, vote for me next time as well. I want to be like the Ant and Dec. Nobody ever gets to win this one. I win it every time, people. Charles Gordon,
as I said, it was a landslide victory.
Thank you, Charles Gordon, entrepreneur and author. Thank you so much for joining me here on GB News. It's fast approaching 31 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. On the way, my panel will return. There's loads still to discuss. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nana, thank you and congratulations. Well, the top story this hour, Home Office figures show 801 illegal migrants crossed the English Channel in 14 small boats yesterday. That's a record daily number since Labour came into power and brings the total who've crossed this year to over 23,200. And that's as 8 migrants died overnight whilst trying to make that crossing. 53 migrants were on board a boat which got into difficulty off the coast of northern France. Around 51 survivors were rescued. 6 were taken to hospital, including a 10-month-old baby suffering from hypothermia. The news comes less than 2 weeks after a separate incident where 12 migrants died after a boat sank off the French coastline. The Foreign Secretary has defended the Prime Minister following allegations that Sir Keir Starmer's broken parliamentary rules by failing to declare donations of clothing for his wife. The Sunday Times reported the gifts came from Labour donor Lord Ali and covered the cost of a personal shopper, clothes and alterations for the Prime Minister's wife during the election campaign.
This is not a breach of transparency rule. It's a Prime Minister that's acting positively to make sure that everything is above board. And this money comes from a long-standing, over 2 decades. Lord Ali has been in the House of Lords. He has been a big supporter of the Labour Party. He's a self-made man. And I think there is nothing to see here, really.
And today's the Duke of Sussex's 40th birthday. The youngest son of the King will celebrate the start of his 40s at his Californian home with his wife Meghan and their children Archie and Lilibet. The Prince has said he was anxious to turn 30, but that he's excited about 40 and he says his mission is now doing good in the world. Earlier this morning, the ex-account for the royal family wished Harry a happy birthday in their first public message for the Prince since 2021. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, as we head into next week, we have high pressure building, so that means plenty of fine and dry weather around and some fairly warm days on offer too. For the end of the weekend, though, we do have this cold front which is slowly edging its way towards the southeast of the country, and that's bringing in some cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Now, as we head into the evening, there will still be some rain and drizzle towards the south, but it is generally easing and should just be largely cloudy, and that means it's going to be a fairly mild night compared to recent nights. To the north of this, though, plenty of clear skies and light winds, so we're likely to see some mist and fog develop overnight, particularly in northwestern parts. And it's going to be fairly chilly too, so in rural areas likely to see some spots of grass frost. So as I say, to start Monday morning, there should be plenty of fine, bright weather around, but there's likely to be some mist and fog in places as well, particularly in those rural spots. So even though there'll be bright sunshine, do take care for the Monday morning commute, particularly in northern parts of Wales, northwest England, where there could be some quite dense fog in places. Towards the south, a fairly cloudy start. Still could be the drips and drabs of rain and drizzle across hilly areas, but any mist and fog and cloud is generally going to be lifting and breaking through the course of the day as that high pressure builds, and that means plenty of fine and dry conditions to start the new working week. Perhaps a bit more high cloud in the northwest towards the end of the day, perhaps even seeing some rain and drizzle creeping into the Outer Hebrides, but otherwise plenty of fine dry weather and feeling fairly warm as well, with highs of 22 Celsius down in the southeast. Into the evening, feeling quite chilly as soon as the sun goes down, likely to see some frost once again and some mist and fog, but still more in the way of cloud feeding into the northwest. And as we head into the next week, high pressure sticking around, so once again lots of fine, warm, sunny weather around.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Let's put it there in the gap. Thank you, darlings. There you go, put it at the front there. You just get a look at that. I got an award. I actually got an award. Wow. All right, well, welcome. 37 minutes up to 5 o'clock. Welcome. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is the dream of net zero by 2050 coming to an end? A report in today's Telegraph reveals that ministers are planning to back away from a total ban on the sale of new petrol-powered cars by allowing hybrid vehicles to remain on the market until 2035. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the dream of net zero by 2050 coming to an end? Joining me now, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, also journalist and broadcaster and car expert.
Car dealer, car expert, motoring journalist sometimes.
Danny Kelly.
A man of many hats.
What have you written apart from that book on food?
I'm speech journalist and broadcast journalist.
Because you said that author bit, it's obviously you wrote a cookbook, didn't you?
I did write a cookbook when I was a lot younger.
15 pages, 15 pages, 16 pages.
A very thin pamphlet. Is it right? I think it's too early to tell whether 2050 is just a pipe dream. But what I can tell you is that the gritty reality of not having the infrastructure or the demand for electric cars, pure electric, is now kicking in. And Keir Starmer understands it. It's all very well being in the opposition, slagging off. I think it was Boris Johnson who used it as a Brexit dividend, saying we're out of the EU, so let's release some freedoms. We'll bring 2030, so we'll push 2030 back to 2035 for the ban on petrol and diesels. Keir Starmer said, oh, that's reckless, you're this, you're that. And now he understands that when you're in power and authority, there's no point optimistically saying we're going to do it unless you can achieve it. The demand is not out there. I know this for a fact as a car dealer. There aren't enough charging points. You have range anxiety. If you live in a detached house with your own charging point and you may tootle around town, that's great. But you're only doing that for one of two reasons. Probably the first one is virtue signalling, because you can't beat the reliability and the long range of a petrol or a diesel.
Well, you could always, and these little tootly journeys, you could possibly walk rather than take the car or take a bicycle or something. They're probably more likely to be able to do that. I looked at the cheapest electric car in the market was one by Citroën. I think it was about $7,500 or something. But it specifically says in it, city driving, so it's telling you, don't go too far.
Keep to your own neighbourhood, basically.
Yeah, don't go
I mean,
beyond.
I think Danny's right. That's the problem. If we're going to have electric cars, we need the infrastructure in place to charge them up, and it doesn't exist. I've got nothing around my way at all where I could actually charge an electric car. And when I looked at one, the cost of it compared to the similar petrol one was just too high. So prices have to come down. That has to be done. What's a bit confusing about this report is quite what it means, because what the government is saying is that they were always going to exempt some hybrid cars. We don't know which ones, what the details are. Broadly, if you keep putting deadlines back, we are not going to make 2050 net zero. So I would like to see the deadlines kept, but until we see the details of which cars are actually exempt, it's not. Then we really don't know what an effect it would have on net zero.
But there's no point putting a deadline in if you don't then put in the infrastructure. I mean, they put 2030, they pushed it back to 2035, and that was obviously because the Tory party were very concerned because they were losing votes and people weren't happy with the 2030 deadline, which was madness. But if no one's buying electric cars, people don't want them.
That's right.
People don't want them. I'm not going to buy one. I will not buy an electric car. This is just to let the government know. I'm not buying one. I'm not buying it because I've not bought into the notion that as a single woman driving a car, if that thing runs out...
It's not safe for you.
What am I going to do? Late at night, what do I do?
What on earth are the police forces around the country supposed to do? If you go to a police station, there's probably 20 Panda cars which are in circulation and use 24 hours a day. When one 8-hour shift stops for the day, another person says, can I have the keys to that car? They go and fill it with diesel or petrol, and it continues. What on earth are police forces supposed to do with electric cars? They've got to leave it charging for an hour and a half. It's not going to work for the police.
It's also a stupid idea because obviously then car park places, like places by them in the motorway become car parks. Everybody's fighting over charges. You've seen fights where people get involved because they want to be charging their car instead of somebody else's. As a woman, if you're on your own, what are you going to do? Somebody takes their charge out, and they're going to have to then police the charging points.
Would you be in favour of keeping to the 2030 deadline if all those issues were sorted out?
No, because they're stupid.
No.
It doesn't even make any sense. Why would I want a car that can do such a short range, and then I'm going to have to find another charging point somewhere, and then I've got to get to that, and then I've got to have 45 minutes to be able to sit down and wait for it to do that, especially if you've got children. That just... This was designed, or the idea has been created by a man. It has to be a man.
I wouldn't be in favour.
Would never come up with this.
That is so sexist. I would
It's
never
not
be...
sexist.
Of course it is.
No,
You're
it's
saying
not.
that a man and a woman are separate with their ideas.
I think on this occasion they would, and the reason I say that is because in my mind as a woman, I'm thinking, I will be alone at a place where I've got to charge something for 45 minutes.
No, I agree with that point.
So this is the thinking.
Yeah.
So the way women will be thinking and the way a man would be thinking and approaching this subject, I think would be very different.
But there's lots of female politicians who are pushing that, aren't there?
Theresa May was the one who came up with the 2050 deadline, but you know.
To answer Nigel's point about whether the infrastructure was in place for 2030, I would still not be in favour of it, Nigel, because it's universally unpopular. People can't afford electric cars.
No, but what I was talking about is the prices would have to come down because that's, you know, the demand would obviously go up on the basis that you couldn't buy a petrol diesel one after that. So prices coming down and infrastructure in place, and that was the question really. If all those things were sorted, are you in favour of the idea of the deadline and therefore hitting 2050?
No, I'm not, because I don't think 5 years is going to affect 2050. We're talking about 2030 going to 2035. My position on this is that it's universally, generally speaking, unpopular because people don't want it, can't afford it and can't see the benefit.
And also, a lot of the advertising for the electric cars, they've had to change it now to say that it's zero carbon whilst it's on the road. So
lots of offsetting.
Yeah, so obviously to build the electric car, it uses a lot of carbon anyway. So it's only zero carbon, it's the emission of the car itself and not the car itself. The car itself is not net zero, but the emissions from the car when it's on the road and driving is zero. And that's not good enough. If you're going to quote this nonsense, then you actually need to be able to create a car using no carbon, and I think that's impossible. So I think this is a gimmick. I think it's over. What do you think? gbnews.com/your say. Is net zero simply a pipe dream? But coming up, Supplement Sunday, where I test my panel on some of the stories that caught their eye this week. That's next.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Fatima's UK campaign. Children and young people matter. Because I actually run a campaign, and my ministry today is about looking after children in the care system and improving their life outcomes. You know, for me, I had a difficult start to my childhood, and I will never forget it. I mean, I always say I may have left the care system, but the care system hasn't left me. And I instantly understand the importance of giving our young children and young people the opportunity to also, you know, have good life outcomes. So Fatima's UK campaign is all about that. And it's a summit next year. Eamon, I hope you're going to come.
No, I know we've talked about this before, and certainly, I mean, I believe in what you're doing. I think it's marvellous what you're doing, and that's why, you know, when you think about children, and children are so close to you, and you look at that horror that happened in Southport yesterday, I mean, things like that
exactly.
will really hit home hard.
Well, children are the innocent ones, aren't they, Eamon? And this is what we look at when you think they're the future. We've got to start to put them back at the top. And it's a travesty when we see things like that, you know, Omar, that happen. You know, children are the ones that are impacted. And, you know, it's, for me, you know, really important to be able to do the best we can and looking after their future. And so hopefully, you know, I'm going to the Pyrenees in September, Eamon. That's my next challenge, the Bay of Biscay from France to Spain and back. And hopefully people can go online, fatimascampaign.com, and give generously to help make a difference to these young people's lives. Because, as I say, children are the future.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Leggin says, oh, was the award open to white people? Of course it was. What are you talking about? What? It's a very silly one. Yes, it was. And there were all people of all different colours in there as well, and everyone could vote. Honestly, out of interest, what is this? Right, it's time for Supplement Sunday, the part of the show where my panel have a look at some of the stories hitting the headlines. Joining me, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Right, so let's start with Nigel Nelson. What's your one?
I found this one. It's the Royal Marines, and they're changing their code words for operations because the top brass have decided the ones they already had were too sexual. So as a result of that, violent entry becomes green salamander, and final thrust turns into commando forge. Completely meaningless.
Commando means naked, though.
Well, it could do.
Yes,
in which case
yeah.
they made a mistake there.
So what was the one that's turned into commando?
That was final thrust has become commando.
The reason, that is in the ears and mind of the person who hears it and not necessarily the person that says it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
If I say it's the final thrust, if you, in your mind, think of a sexual reference to that when it isn't, that's your mind. But the person who's obviously thinking that thinks like that.
Exactly. That's the point.
And the Royal Marines is exclusively a male regiment, that's right, isn't it? And if boys want to have some banter, historical banter, and it's not seen as offensive to the lads, I think they should be left alone to use it. If, for example, there's resistance to it in the brigade or the regiment, say, do you know what, it's 2024, we're not happy with it, then that's fine. But I bet you they haven't been consulted.
But final thrust, I mean, that's not... They've changed it to commando something, which... I think that's...
I mean, the important thing about code words... Winston Churchill did this, and he always said that he really wanted aggressive code words like overlord and sledgehammer, because the parents of sons being sent out to battle would have actually resented if they'd gone to Operation Bunny Hug. So the idea is that as long as the words are a bit macho, that's quite good, but these ones don't mean anything.
Right. Danny Kelly,
but this is an awful one. Horror as river otter. We often think of otters as cuddly, cute creatures with massive teeth. River otter drags child off a dock, a little toddler walking on a dock and underwater in a vicious attack before the beast met a grim end. This is in Washington, in America. Mum, toddler, otter leaps onto the boardwalk, drags the little toddler into the water. Mum goes in the drink like a superhero, the superhero she is, grabs the child out of the otter's grip, gets back onto the boardwalk. The otter then goes back for more.
No.
Yeah. Otter, being in America, the otter ends up shot. Natural conclusion for such a vicious attack. But apparently it's not unusual. 6 or 7 attacks like that where otters try and steal toddlers, put them in the water.
Really?
Yeah.
I never heard of that.
I've never heard of that.
You need an operational code word for that.
That could go...
Well, we can't have salamander. The Marines have already got it.
Yeah. Otter's the same as beavers.
There's definitely... Now, there you go, Operation Beaver. Now, that's more of a Royal Marine.
That's what I was
That's a Royal Marine thing, isn't it?
Well, listen, this is my supplement. Military families in legal action over the VAT on private schools. This is, of course, the Labour Party's plan to charge private schools VAT, which obviously those schools will then pass the price on to the parents. And a lot of those children who go to independent schools come from military families, which the government normally would cover, but of course they cover a certain percentage of. So this is another sort of collateral damage from another policy from the Labour Party.
Yeah, I mean they pay a proportion of the fees, and obviously it's their choice. So there are military schools around which are state schools. So for instance, my stepson goes to the Duke of York's Royal Military School in Dover. It's a state boarding school, so a military family could send their children there. They don't have to go to Eton, Harrow or Winchester.
But that's if there are enough places and wherever the school is located, so you got lucky. But this is the final one I wanted to play you. Mrs. Thatcher, this is what she said. Have a listen.
Socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them.
That was the first clip, and then she also said this.
The fact is, Labour are still socialist, and they deliberately set out to impose more government control over people's lives. That is why, that is the reason why they increase taxation. More power for them over our money, less power for the citizen.
Danny Kelly, was she right?
Well, yes, it seems that she has been proven right. And just going back to the 20% VAT, this is the... I've said this before, this is the proletariat against the bourgeoisie. They are being pitted to each other. This is classic socialism, and there'll be many other things like this to come, unfortunately, under the Starmer administration.
The only point to make is that she said it before Tony Blair became Prime Minister, and, of course, he reduced national debt to 40%.
Yeah.
Currently, it's 99%.
But I would argue that Blair wasn't a true socialist like Starmer. Blair was for PFI, for example, with the NHS. He was all for trying to introduce external third-party financial institutions in order to take the strain off.
Keir Starmer can be described as a rampant lefty.
Oh, I think that he's showing the indicators that he's got the potential to be a rampant lefty. Look at the 20% off perceived wealthy families with the schools. What's that then?
Well, what is it? Indeed, good question. Is it left-wingness? Is it? Well, listen, thank you so much to my panel. It's been a pleasure as ever. How much fun was that today? It's been a great, big, fun show. Thank you so much to Pine Pedal, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also broadcaster and journalist Nana Akua. And listen, a huge thank you to you for your company as ever. We love you. Thank you so much for voting for me for this as well. Coming up, loads of stuff. Neil Oliver. And, of course, loads more.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, as we head into next week, we have high-pressure buildings. That means plenty of fine and dry weather around and some fairly warm days on offer too. For the end of the weekend, though, we do have this cold front which is slowly edging its way towards the southeast of the country, and that's bringing in some cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Now, as we head into the evening, there will still be some rain and drizzle towards the south, but it is generally easing and should just be largely cloudy, and that means it's going to be a fairly mild night compared to recent nights. To the north of this, though, plenty of clear skies and light winds, so we're likely to see some mist and fog develop overnight, particularly in northwestern parts. And it's going to be fairly chilly too, so in rural areas likely to see some spots of grass frost. So as I say, to start Monday morning, there should be plenty of fine, bright weather around, but there's likely to be some mist and fog in places as well, particularly in those rural spots. So even though there'll be bright sunshine, do take care for the Monday morning commute, particularly in northern parts of Wales, northwest England, where there could be some quite dense fog in places. Towards the south, a fairly cloudy start. Still could be the drips and drabs of rain and drizzle across hilly areas, but any mist and fog and cloud is generally going to be lifting and breaking through the course of the day as that high pressure builds, and that means plenty of fine and dry conditions to start the new working week. Perhaps a bit more high cloud in the northwest towards the end of the day, perhaps even seeing some rain and drizzle creeping into the Outer Hebrides, but otherwise plenty of fine dry weather and feeling fairly warm as well, with highs of 22 Celsius down in the southeast. Into the evening, feeling quite chilly as soon as the sun goes down, likely to see some frost once again and some mist and fog, but still more in the way of cloud feeding into the northwest. And as we head into the next week, high pressure sticking around, so once again lots of fine, warm, sunny weather around.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to...
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets and My Take at 10.